Council meeting for the Wednesday the 10th of September 2025. Welcome to those members of the public that are in the gallery, those online watching, to staff and councillors. And could we just begin with our normal karakia, please? Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, hei aki ana, te atakura, hei tio, hei huhu, te hei Maori. Thank you. Just to note that we have two councillors who are attending this meeting online, they being Councillor Boyle and Councillor Olsen. We're also expecting Councillor Proctor to probably join online initially, then be absent for a time, but then joining us in person later on. So, yeah, we don't have to actually move. Apologies then. We've got some public participation, which we'll just get to in a minute. Late items. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Tamihana.
Kia ora, there's a perception of a conflict of interest with me with a former member of the PMG. I can disclose that I have had personal dealings with many members of the public and many that have contributed to my causes in the past, which are all publicly available online as part of your election and campaigning process and legalities. So it won't impede my ability to be a decision maker around particularly the Hokio landfill conversation today.
Thank you, so noted. And so, could I welcome our first public participant, Viv Bold, please. Oh, okay, cool.
Hi. I try and keep this to 5 minutes, okay? I feel as though this agenda is very much a clean-up agenda and really shouldn't be on in the election time, but still. The first item in our agenda, of course, is about the closed landfill. This is the actual statement they put out. Although a lot of history has been recorded and a lot of supporting information has been left out of this document. David Clapperton once said, in order to change a consent, change the format, e.g. NLG to community NLG. And I now see that they've actually even changed it again on page 77. To community NLG. And you change the legal requirements needed in the old consents. Hokio does not want HDC to change the format. The Environmental Court endorsed NLG to be the watchdog for the neighbours of landfill and the Hokio owners. Page 77. No communication is included for the locals. Ngāti Raukawa and a person, Heka, Christine Moriarty, are the only ones addresses. None of Moapoko, none of the locals. I'm Moapoko, so why aren't I included? Nothing has changed. NLG is supposed to say nothing. HDC operations have now decided to let the pollution and seepage flow back into the stream, really? Tony Parsons didn't mention Horizons have denied EarthTech because of the breach resource consent. Higher concentrations of leachate through the stream and eons and are now into the sea itself. And also from the pot, please. The concentrations out of the pot need really looking at. I note in this document here it says about grazing sheep. Why graze sheep on poisonous ground? When animals are what they eat, you're just poisoning humans. Councillors are agreeing to yet another hazard coming out of our dump. More consultation money has been wasted on this last lot. And then I'm going to change my direction, I'm afraid, and go into, in this agenda, community jesters. Te Tāpiri, our library, has had 570 plus visitations of people to help computer skills, showing once again help is needed. But this Tuesday, I was in there, it wasn't there, so obviously our help is finished. Further into the document, page 5, up to the 500, 600, just leave it at that, about the Lake Domain Board. I feel very sad. HDC, many meetings have been cancelled this year for the Lake Domain Board. Half the time they don't even know why. Charles is ready and I are ready to go in and it's been cancelled. Nothing has happened there, even with this tourism grant, because HDC won't open it up. The only access people have to the park is through the park to the lake, okay? It's in the Roll Act. Another subject, public hear of matters HDC discuss. Sometimes meetings 2 or 3 times a month, but not with the real public. Invitations only meetings. I'm very pleased to know though that HDC now have a reserved fund so they can put the excess money into it rather than giving it for pathways. Thank you, Viv Bold. Any questions?
Any questions for Viv?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Viv. Could I now welcome Charles Rudd, please?
Kia ora tātou, everyone. Just to let you know that I had one subject matter to speak to, but Mayor won't let me talk to you people about it, so I'll be sending it to all the political parties for them to read it. Anyway, I'll get on with it. I'm here to talk about the landfill from that big Bible you had, right? And I'll talk to things on like page 49, bracket 14, landfill agreement, question mark on the landfill agreement. NLG, PMG, HECA, question mark on that. NLG is correct, PMG is out of order. HECA approved a non-landfill event by Horizons to be a non-entity in the issue of the landfill. Page 51. Brackets 34, non-compliance, that's a question mark. Page 51, 37, over the last 30 years to date, how many millions of the district ratepayers' dollars have been spent on the ongoing failures of not any improvements of both the Hokio and the Wairiri's ongoing contaminations? Millions. If you add it up over the 30 years, how many millions and millions have been spent on it? Page 52, brackets 39, specialist assistance. That's a question mark. That's a joke, as said. Discussion with iwi, another joke. PMG agreement, another joke, right? Who's the PMG? They're nobodies, paid by this council. Page 52, brackets 41. Engaging with Maori, joking. Maupupu iwi, hapu, another joke. Only Jack Warren, Eugene Henry, Viv Tauik and myself have been on this case for 30 years. 30 years when us four have been on it. As Maori of Naitara. Our iwi is Naitara, not Maupupu. The rest, as per MTR, plastic mana-munching Maori, will agree to HDC if paid behind closed doors. Page 53, brackets 45. Community and engagement, same set as iwi partners in PMG. Yeah, they make me laugh, these things. Page 53, brackets 50. HDC had 30 years with no particular focus on groundwater entering the Hokio and the Wairere streams. No focus at all. Will that take another 30 years? That's the question. Page 63, landfill agreement. Internal Affairs and the Auditor General will have an interest in that subject matter, tell you. Page 77, 2.7. The Living Landfill Management Oversight Group, blah, 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 is a cart before the horse, right? Just a pipe dream of HCC as they cannot eventuate until the intention must go through the process of a variation of the 2019 resource consent condition with submitters having input. Kia ora tātou, any questions?
Any questions for Charles? Mr. Jennings.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Charles.
Yeah.
I'm going to just start with a comment and then I've got a question
That's
for you.
fine.
So, one of the observations I've had is that throughout this landfill process, we've had many voices through the NLG, PMG, people coming and talking to us, public forum, and as making these kinds of submissions, right throughout the process. Many, many voices. A lot of disagreement on the way forward and whose voice should be given priority to, and it's almost sounding like you're saying that certain voices should be deprioritized or cut out of the process. And so my question really is, what's the way forward? I mean, do you support this concept of the new oversight group that's captured in the closure plan? Because that seems to me to be essentially a consolidation and creation of a platform to try and consolidate all those voices into a platform that allows us to go forward. Because at the moment, there's just so many voices, so many perspectives, and it really makes it hard to actually understand the way forward.
Well,
What's
it's
your
quite
response to that?
simple, really, because the landfill over the last 30 years has been about mitigation of the landfill itself with all these high-paid consultants and lawyers and goodness knows what, right? There has been no real focus on the Hokio stream and all the poisons and that going, carcinogenics going into that stream, and you've got a community of people out there and it's affecting the whole coastline, right? I don't hear these people talk much about the Hokio stream and the community. I think of the health of everyone in the whole facility and people, even visitors going and to Hokio with their children and all the rest of it. I care for them, but they've got to know what it's all about. You've got to go from, when you read a book, you don't read a book at the end. You read it at the beginning, how it all started, when, what was the situation and that. I've been through this for years. And when you get people coming in, they think they know what they're talking about. They wouldn't have a clue. They might show some intelligence, but what are they talking about? The first thing I say, look, people like Jack and I, we haven't got paid or anything like that. We do it from our heart. Vivid Board's the same. Like the PMG group, those people that got on there, they were paid, other than councillors, right? So what do they want to do? Play chiefies and be money munchers? Yeah, sure, you can listen to them, but do they have logic and common sense on the whole issue? Kia ora.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Tammy Harder, you've got a question for him?
Yes, thanks. Firstly, thank you for speaking today. You're very regular and you're very passionate and totally get your thinking. What I wanted to ask you, Matua, was how do you see today playing out? Because if Council were to adopt this plan today as a living document, that's an opportunity to continue to progress the work that's needed around the landfill. But if they don't adopt it, what's your answer to that? Because one of the questions that keeps coming up is about wasted money. And so if we don't actually make a decision around the matter today, then that's potentially going to mean more money, more consultation, and more refiguring of a process forward. So I know this is a hard question, but as a council, it's really disappointing because we see members of NLG, PMG, but we're still seeing a division. And I think that's what Councillor Jennings was touching on. So we're here making a decision today in the best interest we believe in the landfill and all the environment and the community. But if we don't make a decision today, there's a cost to that. So where do you want it? What's your thinking?
I've already spoken to it, and that is to go through a variation of the resource consent conditions through that process with Horizons, because they're the regulators, right? You've got to go through that, look at the 2019 resource consent condition, and do a variation on it. Then it goes back to the public for the public to have input, rather than just do the scattergun approach straight away. You're still going to have a variation of that resource consent condition. You have to. You can't make a decision right now and keep on going, and then all of a sudden, Horizon. I mean, this council still owes information to Horizon, hasn't given it to Horizons.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate your
Oh,
time.
there's another thing I hear through my spies that this council intends to put a new culvert over the Hokio Beach Road into the stream. I don't know how true that is, but what Tom was telling.
And just for councillors' information, in reference to Charles's not being able to say what he wanted, a statement, it did not pertain to anything that was on the agenda and was, so I disallowed it. So could I now welcome Christine Moriarty, please? Are you going to do it together? Okay. Oh, Rachel's coming up as well. Okay.
Well, I can go back and leave. I'm referring to David to speak on that.
Sorry, Tim, you weren't on my list. Are you just in support? Okay. Okay, thank you. So who's leading off? I saw two hands go up then. Okay, all right. Rachel, do you wish to commence then, please?
Oh, so the red light has to be on. Okay. So greetings, tēnā koutou katoa, staff and members of the public, tēnā koutou katoa. I've been a member of the Ngāti Wari Marae Committee since 1975, rather a long time, and chair of the trustees and the committee since 2003. I've been an observer and participant in land and water issues with the Borough Council and HDC all my adult life. I began as an active member of the working party that advocated for the removal of the sewage from Lake Horowhenua from 1978 until that was achieved in the early 1980s. And inevitably, I've been involved in more environmental issues at Hawkeoa than I can list. The Livin rubbish dump made its way into our neighbourhood when I was a child and eventually became the dump for all the neighbouring communities, towns, rural areas, so Foxton, Shannon, and eventually Kapiti, and for a time received waste from Wairarapa more recently. Promises to manage the site well, to be environmentally friendly and conscious of the negative impacts of a burgeoning mountain of waste in the neighbourhood have not been kept. Discussion about the management and impact of leachate, which we talk about leachate, and I hope that people realise it's rainwater contaminated with chemicals and pollutants have become part of our everyday lexicon for our hapu and iwi. Located beside the stream, north of the mountain of rubbish, the stream is being polluted with the poisonous leachate from the old site. We have no doubt. I've made more submissions than I care to recall over the past 40 years. In 2002, I spoke to the council, Tom Robinson was the mayor, and recommended that the council budget for $50 million for a clean-up as they went ahead at the end of this process of the consent period. It was met with smiles and a big yawn from Nathan Guy at the time. And so I've been around with this for far too long. Now, we ask as always that no leachate enter the Hokiora stream. So we don't want to talk about reduction or management or anything like that. It's no leachate. And at a recent meeting of the stakeholders, we agreed that the Plan B, and this is what we said, to finalise and manage the landfill closure to prevent leachate entering the stream. Now, it was edited and reproduced as a shared goal in your papers for today, and it was that all parties to the closed landfill work towards ensuring that leachate is monitored and managed. We want it stopped because it says monitored and managed to reduce any adverse impact on the Hokiora stream, including taking steps to remediate as per consent requirements. So there's a few other ideas there that we would prefer for it to be much simpler. So I'd like to recommend the Council resolves to commit to permanent closure of the landfill with all consents in place, and we've put by December 2026, so within 15 months, and to finalise and manage the landfill closure to prevent leachate entering the Hokiora stream. We don't see that reducing its impact is the ideal. So I thank you for the time today. My statement's short. We've had, I think we've found a way forward with some of this, which I'm feeling positive about, and hope that we can do that by the end of next year at the latest. So thank you very much.
Kia ora, Rachel, thank you. Before David speaks, maybe are there any specific questions for Rachel first? Or do you want to wait till you've heard from David as well and Graham? Councillor Grimstone.
Kia ora, Rachel. Look, when we were debating the closure of the landfill 3 years ago now, pretty much, I recall reading a paper that you and I believe Pātaka wrote. And you've referenced today what you recall the dump opening when you were young, but could you, I guess, give us a brief overview around what your life in Hokio at your marae was like prior to the dump opening? Just short.
The dump is part of the whole environmental landscape, I guess, out there. So when I was a child, we had a cool, clear, clean stream that was, the reason our marae was located there, as with many marae beside the water stream, was for the water. And so as a child, we played in that stream, and the water from that stream was used to sustain the community. We all know that in 1953 the council put the sewage into the lake, and we had 20 odd years of misery, we might say, and it drove our people away from Hokiora. People sold their land, it was no longer safe to live there. So with that background, and then a piggery on our western boundary, 1953, once the council put the sewage in, we had the sewage coming down the stream, we had the piggery on the west, and then lo and behold, we had a dump. The dump for Levin initially, located to the south. Once that dump became a regional facility, and it made a huge impact. Just the traffic along the road and the sight of that huge mountain, really, it was disheartening. And so many of our people chose not to come back to our marae. We became a very small entity. And then, of course, when it became a regional landfill and another massive mountain was created out there, one of the decisions we made was to try to get some of our children to become to go to university and study environmental science. And we had 4 of those children some years ago. Now, I wouldn't encourage them to do that because it's too depressing. I'd much rather they went into banking. Maybe that's depressing. But, to go into other professions that there's more satisfaction. So it's been a big impact, not just on Ngāti Wharerakua, on the whole community.
Thank you, Rachel. Look, before we go on, I just want to acknowledge your time and effort that you have contributed to welfare, not only your own right, but the wider environmental issues that around Hokio, and you know the fact that you're still here today after 50 years, speaks volumes for your commitment and dedication to obviously trying to remedy and right those issues and decisions that have been made many, many years ago. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Kia ora, Bernie. Mayor, Bernie.
David.
You want to speak?
Yeah, you're speaking last time.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, all right. It's all right there, Rachel. I'll still see. Mayor Bernie, CEO, councillors, staff, Graham Lindsay. What I'd like to say is that the best international practices for leachate and landfill management in 2025 are very different from those that are set in the old landfill resource consent conditions. Now, we're talking about leachate, which is a multi-chemical, for want of a better word, conglomeration that comes from the breakdown of waste products, that is industrial and community stuff. We've heard that the ammoniacal nitrogen is the real issue because that is toxic to the environment, it's toxic to the waterways at various levels. Horizons Regional Council has got a trigger target at 0.4 milligrams per litre. That's been exceeded in the last couple of years in the stream at a particular location. Now, what's going to be happening is that, and I'll make this available through Grace and for you, that can you hold that side? That the landfill is creating this leachate and it's travelling across towards the Hokio stream. The oldest leachate is here, which is the lowest concentration. As more and more rubbish has been put on, we're getting a gradual increase in the concentration going across. What's coming through will still be increasing. It's not decreasing, it's going to be lasting for quite a number of years. So we're looking then at what is actually happening. And again, when we look at the phases of the landfill, there are basically internationally 5 phases. We're sitting in the second, the third, and the fourth phase. This will go on for about 100 years while waste is being produced, and it's going to get eventually to the stream. It's got, as Rachel says, it's important that we stop it getting into the stream. There are new processes to go through within that system. One of those methods is to cap, because we know that the capping which has been done has reduced, and this is difficult to describe, but we've had no monitoring of leachate from 1970s until 1994 when boreholes were put in. And so this is a graph of B2, ammoniacal nitrogen, coming across time from 94 to the present time. And you can see that that's peaked, supposedly, but that peak is now close to the Hokio stream. This stuff is migrating between 6 and 8 metres per year across from there. So if you think that 1994 to this point in time, that ammoniacal nitrogen sitting down here is already in the stream, down back this end, is already down in the stream. So we're getting to a peak coming up very shortly. It's not a matter of years, it is going to come. You can't turn around and say, no, it's not going to come. So we need to monitor what's going on in the stream continuously. The current monitoring, and the monitoring which is suggested in the document, is to do 2 samples a year. Now, consider this. I've been talking now for 3 or 4 minutes. One of those minutes you pick up some solution and you analyse that. All of the other time, the other 48,000 or however many minutes in a month are not monitored. But we know from the results that for 3 months we were continuously above that on those 3 minutes. How much has gone through that we're not monitoring? And this is why we need continuous monitoring. This is the 2025 situation. We need to look at it. And so, yeah, I'll leave it there. This information will be made available through Grayson to you.
Thank you, Graham. Any particular questions to Graham? Councillor Grimston.
Just picking up the point around continuous monitoring of water flow at Hokio. In your view, what would the benefits to council be of implementing such a monitoring regime in addition? And secondly, do you also accept that under the plan that is before us for consideration, that it is a living document and potentially could have those monitoring aspects strengthened as well? So I guess 2 viewpoints.
Right, so answering the second part first, I believe that we need to monitor continuously so that we're seeing whether the flow of leachate coming in is creating problems for the environment, for the living creatures within the stream. Sorry, Clint, I've just lost the first track. Benefits of monitoring. This really goes back to I'm going to say, the Maori of the iwi, of the water. It's how do we know what's going on if we look simply at a point in time? It's like saying, okay, we're going to monitor your speed coming from Otaki to Levin, and we know that at Otaki it's 50 k's an hour, and in Levin it's 50 k's an hour. Between that, we don't know what you're doing. So it's important that we have that continuous monitoring. Does that answer the question, Clint?
Thanks, Graham. Councillor Tamiana.
Thank you very much, Graham, for your insight as always. I suppose the key question for me today really is to ask you that, do the group have confidence that should the management plan, closure management plan, be adopted today in its current form as a living document, do you have the confidence that you have the ability to give the essential feedback, provide and be able to participate what is essential to the plan being further developed? Because I think I need to hear from you as a councillor that you have that confidence that you are able to make those challenges, make those decisions to be considered for us for December, I believe. If that's correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. The short answer is yes, and it needs to be a robust system. It's got to be a freely exchanged system, and I believe that that's what is now going to be part of this document. And so, yes, I have confidence that we can move forward, that we will get to a point of agreement, and our aim is that the leachate does not enter the stream. Not mitigating the process, let's get to a process of 2025 science to stop it.
Thanks, Graham. David, do you wish to speak as well?
Kia ora, me Bernie, and councillors, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm here to speak about the landfill, obviously, and I would echo the comments you already heard from Rachel to say that I'd have to say the Hokio environment's been a large part of my life for the last 50 years as well. And it's, I have to say, like her, I can remember the Hokio stream being a relatively clear, fully healthy and a safe stream. You wouldn't be able to say that today. And in fact, we haven't been able to say that for many years. So I've been elected by the community to serve on the project management group, which I think you're all aware was set up to pursue the closure of the landfill and to ensure that a proper aftercare regime was established. And that's what we're talking about here, this closed landfill management plan. The PMG, despite what we've heard previously, it was set up as an out-of-court contract arrangement. I think you all know that the community got so frustrated in the 2010s that we took this council to court, or she threatened to, took a court case, and because the evidence was so overwhelmingly in favour of the community, the council asked us to settle out of court, and that's why the landfill agreement was signed in 2018. Now, I have to say that we're very pleased that the landfill has been closed. It's a great relief and a great first step in a process that we have to go through. And it's encouraging that we hear the council will confirm that decision as part of this landfill, closed landfill plan. We have since then been trying to get this closed landfill plan established. And I have to say, it's been frustrating and disappointing that it's taken so long. But you can appreciate that it is a process we have to go through. But meanwhile, leachate is coming out of the bottom of that dump 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, day and night, every day of the week. So we're here today because the community is concerned that we are making progress and not just marking time. I have to say that the community's faith in process and progress has been seriously damaged or dented in the last little while. And some recent events, which I'm sure you saw the letter from, signed by a series of organisations from Hokio and the wider environment, sent to you explaining, has been very disappointing for us, frustrating, and it's been caused an erosion of good faith and trust and confidence in how things are being managed. This has culminated just recently in the resignation of the manager of the project management group, which we see as a great pity, a tragedy really, because he leaves a considerable gap in our resources, and we need to make sure that his place is filled with somebody of similar capability. And we definitely believe that there needs to be a complete reset of the relationship between council and the community to ensure that the mutual respect and genuine cooperation is going to make sure that this proper plan is fully implemented. Now, as far as the plan goes, we do have some concerns, a few reservations, but we are willing to accept that it is accepted in principle. We would never argue with the fact that it is required and it is necessary. But there are some statements in there which are contentious. some that we don't agree with, some which are very vague, and some which are too open-ended and not time-bound. So we would hope that this soon, and we understand that the plans are afoot to have this tidied up and tightened up considerably. There are some statements in there that we're concerned about. I won't go into details, but one particular thing that Rachel has mentioned is the fact that there was a community goal established only 6 weeks or so ago, which we all signed up to, the community and staff and council staff. But when we see it in the plan, it's been corrupted, changed unilaterally, which is disappointing. It doesn't do our faith and confidence much good. So that's a bit of a problem, and we hope to see that corrected. So I'd have to say that we're happy to have a plan in place, but we are concerned that it needs to be tidied up and completed. And we've said that we would hope it would be completed by the middle of next year, 30th of June. I know the council have got an aspiration to have a much more complete plan available by the end of this year. Okay, now I'd like to just follow up on a couple of things that Graham has said, and one is that we expect best international practice to be undertaken at the landfill. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. It's a lot more is known about landfills, a lot more is known about leachate and the dangers of it now than was known in the late 1990s when the consent conditions for the landfill were drafted. So we believe that the best practice this in 2025 is not what's recorded in the consents. It's what the cutting edge of science is able to tell us. That's why it is aspiration to just meet the consent conditions is not acceptable anymore. The consent conditions are out of date and not relevant anymore. Like Graham, I believe that the continuous monitoring of the stream is possible. Electronics these days have become a huge distance, and it's not impossible to have a continuous electronic analysis of what's happening in that stream, which would then give us a much better idea of the true picture of the pollution levels and the stream dynamics. We also believe there are new techniques which can be used to purify or at least reduce the level of leachate in the water, which could be extracted, and it may be that would enable it to be sent to the pot disposal area because it wouldn't be heavily loaded with nitrogen. We could remove some of the nitrogen, the majority of the nitrogen. Now, we've always had, though, this non-negotiable bottom line, as Rachel has mentioned, that no leachate should reach the stream. We don't believe there's any future in saying, as we've heard recently, well, the stream's not currently polluted to the point where we can measure it. What we know is that pollution is coming down the track at us, and unless we prevent it getting there, it's no good trying to tidy up a mess that's already been created. $1 worth of prevention is worth $1 million worth of remedy. And that's why we believe that capping of the existing landfill, which is the main problem area, the old landfill that hasn't been lined, is the most logical way to prevent leachate increasing, to stop it at source, or at least to slow it right down at source. And I've got some figures here which...
Sorry, David, I don't want to cut you off, but we are a little pressed for
Got
time.
about another 2 minutes.
Well, you've had 9 minutes already, which is
Okay.
almost double the time that we allow people normally. So I just want to...
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Right, look, we believe that the landfill is currently capped about 50% of its footprint. And if you completely cap it, it will reduce the amount of leachate coming out the bottom by about 60%. Currently it has been reduced a bit, but if we improve the drainage around it as well, that could be another 10 or 20% of improvement, which means the amount of leachate coming out of the bottom would be greatly reduced. We consider that this would be the fence at the top of the cliff scenario rather than having an ambulance at the bottom to collect the leachate and try and treat it. You're stopping it at source or slowing it down at source. Secondly, this can be done immediately without need for a resource consent. In fact, it would be actually fulfilling a resource consent because the resource consent says that it shall be fully capped. Investment in capping would be a preventative measure, as I've said, and would reduce leachate generation. It's a much better investment to stop it at source than it is to try and fix it once it gets to the stream. So we appeal to you as the council to take this step. I believe that our descendants will thank us for taking action to protect and enhance our waterways. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Allen. Sorry, David, could you just turn your mic off while David speaks? Thank you.
Kia ora, David, and thank you, and to the team for the presentation. I know time is a bit against us, but there's an important thing that I need to understand better. You talked about the common goal agreed to by all parties having been unilaterally changed. Now, given it's a public forum, I think it's important that we understand in more detail what you mean by that and what effect, if any, it will have on the goodwill moving forward. Which you've said you believe we can work together, but I just need to understand how that impacts.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind. I was at the meeting when the goal was set, and the goal was that to finalise and manage the landfill closure to prevent leachate entering the Hokio stream. Now, you'll see in the old landfill plan, there's a couple of sentences here, which a couple of provisos, and we'll do our best, and perhaps we might do this, and all things being equal. But that's not what the agreed goal was. So what we're saying is that it's a sad, we're frustrated that the community goal has been unilaterally changed. We haven't seen it until it turned up in this plan. We haven't seen that sort of thing.
Reference.
They've got that from me.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here today, sharing your concerns, and we hear you. Today we hopefully will. We're going to talk about next steps, but that relationship that we have between us all needs to obviously be strengthened, and some better communication. And so, I hope that we can work together to resolve some of those issues that you've highlighted. So, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mayor Bernie, I did have one question I was hoping to ask of. It doesn't actually have to be asked of anyone, but I'm struggling to find the information in my document. Yeah, so it's around the Mātauranga Māori Matters Appendix E1. I can't find reference to the detail of that in any of my documents, but I think it's relevant given page 181. 181. Just got there. On page 181. 181.
Page 181.
So I really wanted to raise this because of what a previous public speaker raised around his concerns around the iwi, and I just want to make sure that the parties are aware of that piece so that it doesn't come back later to impact us. Yeah, I apologise. I just actually wanted a bit of clarity around that particular piece to understand that the group are over that, because I don't want it, given what was raised by one of the public speakers and concerns around iwi representation, I want to be absolutely clear that the NLG are aware of particularly page 180 of our agenda, which is the Moepuko statement about the Hokioi stream. So this is just me seeking clarity that the group are actually over this, and it's not something that's going to come back to council as being an issue through lack of engagement or lack of procedure, perhaps. That's all I'm seeking.
Through you, Your Worship, when we present the report, Councillor Tamihana will be able to talk to the engagement process we've been through around the closure management plan, and we'll specifically reference Appendix E for you.
All right. So now we move on to our agenda. First of all, item number 5 is the confirmation of minutes. So the recommendations are that the meeting minutes of Council 6th of August 2025 be accepted as a true and correct record, and that the public excluded meeting minutes of Council 6th of August 2025 be accepted as a true and correct record. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to 6.1, the mayoral report. Move that the council receive and note this report. Seconded by Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items on that report that councillors wish to seek clarification, noting that the attachments in that report include our submissions to government on various policy that the government are planning to introduce. Councillor Tamihana.
Can I be wondering? I would like to ask if we're able to receive copies of the late domain board meetings. I don't think we received those at all.
Published on the website. Yep. They're public meetings, so yeah, definitely.
Could they not be just circulated to us as councillors?
Through you, Your Worship, we'll make sure a link is sent in the weekly elected member update, but noting they are publicly accessible.
Yeah. All right. 6.2, the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board Chairperson's report, noting that the chair is here. John, if you wish to come to the table and maybe talk to anything that is that are in the minutes. So just move that council receive and note the report of the Foxton Community Board Chairperson's report, seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I don't want to say very much today. It's mostly in my report, but I'd just like to pinpoint a couple of things on the way through. My item number 2 about the end of a 3-year term, I strongly recommend that we look, as LGNZ does, looking at a 4-year term, because I'm sure we can achieve more over a 4-year period than a 3-year period. That's the first one. That the item number 3, the progress we've made is rewarding. It's been very good because we've been able to get working groups together. We've been able to get people from different areas working together. We've been able to work with Council and Horizons on the resilience scheme, which worked very well and got jobs done on time and on budget. I think that's a wonderful thing. The Foxton Beach Endowment Fund policy has taken on a lot of work, a lot of support from Council members on that one. Many thanks to Ashley for all the work she did on there. Great relationship with iwi, and I think we've actually achieved something a lot there. We'll be talking about that later on in the council meeting. And finally, Foxton and Foxton Beach do have a plethora of organisations which should not be ignored, because they are all concerned with their community and they're very keen for them. And that's really all I have to say at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any questions for John? Deputy Mayor Allen.
Oh, just a question. Thank you for that, John. When it comes to the report around the endowment fund, along with the recommendations later, do you intend to speak on behalf of the board too?
I intend to be here, yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And look, before you go, I just want to acknowledge the work of the board. I know you've had your last meeting. It's not quite the end for us, but just acknowledge the work that you've all done through the term and the contribution that you've made to the wellbeing of Foxton. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 7.1, which is the Levin landfill closure leachate groundwater project. And while This is going to be introduced by the Chief Executive, just moving recommendations A and B that the Council receive the report and recognise this matter or decision as not significant. Seconded by Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Over to the Chief Executive, and who's going to be joined by Rob and Daniel.
Morena tātou, Your Worship, councillors in our community. The purpose of this report today is to provide an update to Council on the Levin landfill, but most importantly, get your continued support for the direction of travel, which is about making sure that we do right by the promises that were made in the Levin landfill agreement. I want to begin by acknowledging the decision in 2023 to close the Levin landfill in the journey as an organisation that we've been on with community to get there. But I want to particularly acknowledge Pariraukawa, Moeopoko, the PMG, the NLG and the CNLG, and the many voices from the Hokio community in particular whose contribution towards this process is a lot broader and wider than the snapshot of the journey that my team and I have taken over the last couple of years. I want to acknowledge the complexity of what is in front of us. The decision to close the landfill was the easy part. The challenging bit is now how we navigate the next 30 years of restoration and remediation. But I do want to remind Council that you took a bold step in the 2024 long-term plan where you established a landfill legacy rate which ensures that this council has the means to fund the long remediation and restoration of the old dump and the whenua that surrounds it. In May 2024, we presented to Council a way forward on the intervention and treatment of the leachate coming from the old dump. And as councillors, you know that over the last few months, we have been talking to you as we've been talking to the PMG and the NLG and the many parties involved in this process around a way forward given the BPO as approved in 2024 is not currently viable. The many voices in this conversation continue to hold Council accountable to making sure we give effect to the Levin landfill agreement. And a few weeks ago when we provided elected members an update around the further work that was required to ensure appropriate due diligence was taken place to test and peer review and seek independent expert advice on the solution forward. As councillors, you told us that even though that solution was going to be some time away, that we needed to act now, and you wanted to see a plan that showed how we were giving effect to other intervention and restoration opportunities. I also want to acknowledge Pariraukawa in the role that they have played in shaping the decision that I made to fast track bringing the closed landfill management plan to this agenda. I accept that the closed landfill management plan is not finished nor complete, but it is a work in progress and reflects many months of many iterations of a plan that in principle speaks to the spirit of the landfill agreement, but also the decision of this council in 2023 to close the Levin landfill and not use it as a landfill into the future. I'm going to hand over to Daniel, and he's supported by Rob, and I want to acknowledge the work of Dan and Rob and other officers who have done much of the work that sits behind the scenes of what I began commenting on is a complex project. Before you are three specific recommendations in your report. Recommendation C, I just want to specifically speak to the recommendation because later on when you consider the recommendations, you'll note that I have added a slight change to that recommendation. So currently in your agenda it reads that Council endorses the Levin Closed Landfill Management Plan. I'm now requesting that you consider the addition of two words, which is in principle. And while the spirit of us in recommending this to you today was always that this is a living document, as you can see in the recommendation, Certainly in the conversations that we have had with PMG and NLG representatives leading up today, it feels like the right thing to do to ensure that those two words are reflected in that recommendation. I want to also suggest an additional recommendation for Council to consider and note that I've provided early signal to elected members on this, but if I could read it out and then I'll hand over to Daniel to speak to the report in more detail. And that is an additional recommendation that I think encapsulates the direction of travel but provides an additional level of detail that should give our community confidence that the work of officers and the work that we were always progressing aligns clearly with the landfill agreement. And so that recommendation reads that Council notes officers will be presenting back a report in December 2025, which takes on board expert peer review, iwi and community advice and voice to set out the detailed delivery of landfill aftercare actions as provided for in the landfill agreement and the closed landfill management plan. This will provide recommendations to Council specifically on leachate intervention, capping of the old landfill, and potential purchase of adjoining land for wetland creation. With that, Your Worship, I'll hand over to Mr. Haig and happy to take questions from councillors.
Come up, yeah, don't worry. I will take the report as read. There's obviously been quite a range of discussion and evidence presented today. Some of that does need to be worked through with officers, so I do encourage the community to continue to engage over the coming months as we get to a point of making a decision or bringing a point-in-time document back to Council to assist with decisions. So that's the new incoming Council in December 25. I would also encourage elected members to raise any questions from what you've heard today from the speakers. And while officers are here, I'll attempt to cover some of that off in my summary. But if there are questions that were triggered and in some ways are left unanswered, I would encourage you to ask those of me today. And if we can't respond, we can certainly incorporate that as we move forward. So today is really about endorsement of the closed landfill management plan. This is an important first step in demonstrating an enduring commitment for the aftercare of the Levin landfill. This has been through 5 rounds of engagement over the last 12 months with iwi partners, the NLG and PMG. There are disparate views, and you've heard some of that today. This will remain as we further develop this document and seek a way to move forward from the current consent for an open landfill to a state into the future for a closed site and a consent to aftercare and management of that site for the foreseeable future. There's been a reference today in a question from Councillor Tamihana around the work that's been done alongside iwi partners in this particular statement from Mupoko. I just really want to highlight that we've been through a range of engagements, and Rob could probably talk to this in a little bit more detail. We've taken a very inclusive approach that we're not saying we've got to a point where all parties that have engaged have agreed, but we've certainly shared and almost layered across all of the information and feedback in an attempt to get to a point where ultimately there will be agreement. And the document sits very much in an in-principle format today, noting that there's still further work to do, and it is very much a living document. And to that end, I would suggest that we reach out directly through the concerns raised with the community today and get that public statement for the record attached with a direct quote as our first amendment. So it's certainly understand the concerns are being raised, and we should be getting that that statement updated publicly and directly attributed to PMG or NLG perhaps. We community today related to the Hokio stream and leachate plural. There is a specific focus in the aftercare plan in the next 3 months around managing the effects on the environment from the old landfill. We therefore are seeking endorsement of the approach to actually work with delegated members of PMG and NLG as we develop an enhanced monitoring framework. So you've heard some discussion around that earlier today. that is very much the intent. Council have reached out prior to this meeting and had discussions prior as well with members of PMG, NLG around the prospect of joining us as we develop up the enhanced monitoring framework. This will ultimately lead to the peer review process that we spoke about 12 months ago when we set out on the BPO journey. It was almost, in a perfect world, a three-step process where Council approved a BPO solution to extract leachate. The consent process went swimmingly and it went through a peer review, and we'll be sitting here today perhaps at a point of cutting ribbons. But the reality is, as we went through a process to investigate, we uncovered the constraints around the ability to actually treat that leachate off-site. So we'd heard from the community very early on that there was a requirement to take it away. It couldn't be addressed on-site, so we may need to reopen up some of those conversations. It was also determined that approximately 1.93 hectares of wetland would be disturbed and damaged by extracting that leachate water out. So in order to get a consent across the line, we would need to have a plan as to how that would be mitigated. We also went through a process to look at the technical impacts, and this is all evidence required in order to gain a consent, and that's provided some more clarity around what the current impact of that leachate is. So I know we've certainly heard a lot around the frustrations and why progress hasn't been made, but a lot of that work and some of those very important technical investigations have been openly shared with the community, and we will encourage them to continue to engage with us as we get towards what is phase 2 of the process, to take all of the work to date and forward that through to a technical review so that we can bring a definitive decision back to Council in December. So that's really covering off our approach to monitoring. It's covering off the approach around the closed landfill management plan. But the other resolution that's important to note today is that the previous decision of Council in May 2024 was very much focused on the sole delivery of a leachate extraction system. We've heard from the community quite directly, potentially for some time, but more importantly in recent months as we've come to a close, that there's a definitive requirement for Council to understand the benefit and commitment and ultimately delivery or not of further capping at the closed landfill site. So we've absolutely committed to progressing that before December. We've committed to working with adjoining landowners and coming back with a proposal through our property strategy process, but for Council to make a decision around adjoining landowners. And we've also committed to further work around the leachate extraction consent process. So what we're seeking today is that delegation to broaden the scope for officers to continue with that work. So that's approved budget, but effectively directing it into these other work streams that have been highlighted in more detail in the report. So at this point, I will pause to take questions from elected members.
Any questions? Councillor Jennings. Gives me a couple of questions, please. Dan, the Viv Bulb talks about the closure management plan on page 77 using some language that replaces the NLG and the PMG. And my question to Charles was just intended to kind of get a sense of appetite for that, acknowledging that the current mechanisms flow from the landfill agreement. And can I just understand that the closure management plan is not necessarily saying that those will be unilaterally replaced as of tomorrow? There's essentially a process that would need to follow in terms of amending of resource consent conditions to enable that consolidation and a new group, or a reformed group to be established. Is my understanding correct?
I could answer that, Councillor Jennings. Yeah, that's exactly right. In respect to the fact that the closed landfill management plan doesn't set to replace any consenting conditions, the closed landfill management plan is merely the vehicle to ensure that we have a detailed plan which includes both the BPO option and the consenting, reviewing the consents. That specific piece of work come out through the negotiation period when we sent the closed landfill management plan out to all the groups and seeking feedback, and a significant amount of feedback requested that that group be formed.
And this final question, which is just a little bit of a preamble, there's a risk today that if we don't adopt this document in principle, that a new council could take a completely different direction in terms of, at an extreme, and I'm saying this at an extreme, there could be a complete reversal in terms of the future of the landfill. And so the importance of today's signal in terms of adopting the closure management plan is, I guess, a continuation of another step to reinforce that earlier resolution. But my question is around the use of the word in principle in the resolution, because obviously we've got, and you've talked about those community aspirations or the goal, the expectation being inserted into the document. And so if it's adopted in principle, what's the safeguard to ensure that we're not signing ourselves up to things or committing to things that we're not making really robust financial decisions around to actually understand what are the implications? Because we might have a goal, but actually on assessment it's not financially viable to deliver on that goal, if it goes so far over and above consent conditions or beyond an agreement that it's just it's entirely infeasible or too expensive. Like how do we manage that when we're going to be signing up to essentially committing to a document in principle, acknowledging that there's still detail to work out and commitments and goals to kind of operationalise or implement?
Essentially, that's probably a really, really good question, Councillor Jennings, because I guess as officers, when we represent council and we're working through this closed landfill plan, words matter. And so when we use the words non-negotiable or the word prevent or stop, we have to ask ourselves whether we have delegation to use those words as officers. But we also have to understand from a future perspective what that opens us up as a council or the community to, should those things can't be achieved. And so let's talk, I guess, specifically to leachate reaching the stream. And there's no denial that the leachate exists. It's always been something that we've always been committed to doing our best to finding an outcome. Now, I appreciate that that's non-negotiable for groups and it's an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves into. But if we have a closed landfill management that commits to something that's non-negotiable, like the word prevent or stop, then what are we signing up to in respect to costs in the future? So our BPO at the moment is based around approximately $2 million from extracting leachate. Now, we knew on its own that extraction system wouldn't prevent all leachate. It would be one of many, like the solutions out there, like the capping, like the wetlands and things like that. But any solution that we seek, it's important to understand that the full intention is to stop it and do our best to stop it. But from a consenting condition perspective, everybody understands that may not be achievable. So essentially to your question, words matter. And if we have the word prevent or stop in the closed landfill management plan, then that's a very strong form of messaging.
I think, Councillor Jennings, to the earlier part of your question, which was around the importance of the landfill closure management plan, and you made some commentary about what could it mean for a new council in a different direction of travel. I think it would be very difficult for any council to change the direction of travel around the landfill being closed. council closed the landfill on the premise of a landfill agreement, which, if council walked away from the landfill agreement, requires council to go through an environment court process. But even to start that process, we'd need mandate. And our long-term plan, our infrastructure strategy, our financial strategy, our revenue and financing policy have baked in that the landfill is closed. Now, as Chief Executive, I'm clear about that, but when you sit in a room with people in the community who have fought for so long to close the landfill, council endorsing the landfill closure management plan is another sign that we are real and we actually meant it. So while I didn't think it was, I suppose I had a perspective that it wasn't as important as it is. It's important that when we're talking to community who, are very connected and have a whole lot more experience on this journey than I, having council endorse this closure management plan, albeit it being in principle and albeit it being a living document, those words will matter to the community.
Any further questions for the team? Councillor Grimstone.
Look, I've got a couple of questions. So, one of the things that I've heard today, and we've heard over multiple number of times, is this concept of many voices, and that many voices, many stakeholders, but essentially we're talking about community, and we're here today talking just about the landfill. But we have got the wider view of the Hokio stream, we've got the wider view of Lake Punahou or Horowhenua, we've got the view of a dangerous road, and we've spent 40 years fighting to get stuff done. And part of me thinks, is there a way we can capture the aspiration that we heard from David in particular to potentially develop, we've done some excellent work with Shannon recently around a Hokio community plan that starts to capture and harness the aspirational view that will help support the mahi that you're doing around the landfill and the best practical options, but also help inform or support the work that is to come in the next few years, and whether you have a view around whether there's some advice to some benefit around a community approach that captures that opportunity.
We'd obviously have to go and look at resourcing of that. It wouldn't be necessarily the engineering team that would lead out. Would be a party to assist and provide that input. But what I'm hearing is that trying to broaden the focus rather than on the problem, which is acknowledged, and the specific solutions related to the landfill, looking more broadly into that Hokio catchment and the community, noting that it could take many forms in terms of the re-energising of the lake accord, and that would be important mahi to progress alongside owners and lake trustees. But perhaps where you're referencing, I'm hearing, is more community focused around not just the Hokio stream, but the wider challenges of the Hokio community. So there could absolutely be a direction from elected members to look at contributing funding to a work stream around that, and probably look for the CE to look at how we go away and scope that and come back, which wouldn't be before the end of this term, but can certainly document the intent around that.
And look, just something that I'd just like you to unpack a little for us and for the community as well. So I think it was Graham who raised it, but fundamentally, can you just explain the difference between what they were seeking in terms of the consent conditions being met versus the best practice options at a 2025 standard? And where we actually sit in between those, or whether you will consider the best practice standard of 2025 while continuing the work over the next period of time in terms of the way forward.
I think we've got a slight conflation of the two issues there. So one was focused around monitoring within the Hokio stream. Council is committed to working with Graham and other members of the community actively around an enhanced monitoring framework. So in terms of a closed management plan, we're moving from a closed landfill to an open landfill to a closed landfill. It's almost saying let's do less monitoring, whereas we're actually saying in this particular area we need to do more, and we have been doing more, well in excess of what the consent requires. We need to do some further work with Graham and also an expert peer review to look at all of that 20 years of monitoring, to look at the recommendations from the ecologist and provide council direction come December on what an intervention should look like. So there's absolutely not denying there's leachate in the environment. What we have highlighted is that council's currently compliant with the consent around the monitoring levels in the Hokio stream, but it's not to say that we should sit back and just say, well, we're not currently causing an issue, therefore we'll do nothing. What we're saying is we actually need to understand more, do more, and get the right people around the table to provide us the best advice. So that is the purpose of the resolution, to almost broaden that scope rather than just simply focus on a particular solution. But it's been uncovered through the investigation. The second element of the question is related to best practice. So when the landfill was closed in 2024, best practice was different to best practice today. The top of the landfill has been capped on 4 occasions, and most recently in 2023. But some of the side slopes remain in the original state when the landfill was closed. They don't meet the full 700 millimetres of a particular type of clay that would prevent any groundwater ingress. Absolutely acknowledge that. Council brought in an expert in landfill management, specialises in this field, went to site, dug holes, provided council very direct advice to say we do not think there's a benefit from capping this, potentially opening up and having large construction equipment on the side of the landfill and potentially damaging the wetland at the bottom could cause further risk. And so what I'm hearing is that there's some evidence was talked about today. I'd encourage that to be presented to council. I certainly haven't cited some of those numbers, and we then agree who would it be best to do a peer review process to give everyone confidence that there's a value and investment in that decision. We are talking upwards of $1 million to do some further capping. It's quite an extensive activity. It could happen this summer if that was the aspiration of council post that peer review, but we're not at a point today that officers have a confident recommendation from a technical expert, and will actively work with the community to get to that point at pace, because we're hearing the concerns and we need to put that to rest.
Thanks, team. If someone's still got questions.
Yeah, I think it was really just to follow on from Councillor Grimstone, really, but it's more around the potential. What's the advice that we can provide around the ongoing water monitoring that's been raised today? How can we build that in as part of today's resolutions? And the second question, was actually in response to what Rob said around the no leachate to the stream, or the wording. Sorry, Rob, it's just escaped me. But I suppose I'm going to ask a similar question of you as I asked to the Hokio, to the community groups. Was, do we have the confidence ourselves as an organisation to actually ensure that the concerns and the confidence that they see in us can be reciprocated? I just want to understand it, because when you said what you said, Rob, it sort of felt like it was like a die in the ditch moment, in terms of we can't deliver on something we can't deliver on. But if it was worded in principle, does that alleviate some of that concern perhaps you shared?
I wonder if that's a question for me to answer. I have absolute confidence in my team's ability to lean into this and to continue to work in good faith. But what I don't underestimate is how challenging and complex this work is, and that requires everyone to come to the table with an open mind, but with the mission being the focus. And we know that the mission is about making sure that we give effect to the landfill agreement and we ensure that the harm that the old dump is causing is managed and mitigated. And I think the work between now and December is really important to continue to have those conversations with PMG and NLG to bring a more detailed proposition to council that has had expert review, has had that independent peer review, so that you as elected members can have confidence that when we invest ratepayer money, it's making a difference.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, officers are very confident with the plan we have in place. We have an in-house team who have done a lot of work to actually improve that monitoring. We know that it's often testing is subject to outliers with samples, so we've taken ownership of that over the last 18 months. We're confident with the regime that's been put in place. We have reached out to members of community to join us and work with us around that delivery of that monitoring plan.
But can you just, sorry, Daniel, confirm, because from my recollection, how often is the Hokio strain being tested as part of the plan as it's presented to us today? Is it twice? 6 monthly?
Monthly is the plan under the proposal, and I'd just have to double check when we started that regime, but yeah, we can come back with further clarification, but moving forward that is the intention. Yeah.
Thank you, team. Do you want to put the first resolution up for me? Right, so we're now moving to the recommendations, and we're going to do this in part. We'll do C first, and then we'll do D and E, and then followed by the new resolution that the Chief Executive, which we'll call F. So C is that Council endorses the Levin Closed Landfill Management Plan in principle. The CLMP is an aftercare plan setting out management, maintenance and operation of the closed Levin landfill. This is a living document that includes monitoring and proposed operational requirements for leachate BPO projects that will continue to be developed alongside iwi partners, owners, PMG and NLG. Moved by Councillor Tamihana, seconded by Councillor Horis-Pā. Any debate or discussion? Councillor Tamihana.
Just as the mover of the motion, first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the many voices, the many parts of our community that have raised continually over a very long period of time and have stood beside the issue around the Hokio landfill and the impact it has on the Hokio stream, the environment, but more than that, the people that live there, the resources that they're unable to continue to gather to feed and support their whānau. So I'm really happy today to be the mover of this decision, should it be adopted. I also want to acknowledge our council staff for, let's be honest, tumultuous times, very difficult process to work through with so many complexities that the general public will probably never understand. But I think today is a decision moving in the right direction, and I hope that my fellow councillors feel that that's also the right decision for today, and that we continue to progress what we agreed to on behalf of our community to ensure the landfill's closed and that there are no further environmental harms or harms to people in our community. That's all I wanted to add. Kia ora.
Put the recommendation. All those in favour? Right. Councillor Boyle?
Aye.
And I saw Councillor Olsen's hand up as well, so passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving to recommendations D and E. The Council endorses the approach to continue enhancing the monitoring framework related to leachate from the old Levin landfill to inform ongoing analysis and decisions on mitigation requirements to maintain compliance with consent conditions, and E, that Council notes funding to continue researching and validating alternate opportunities, including on-site treatment of leachate, additional capping of the old Levin landfill, or wetland planting will come to the approved existing best practical option funding. Mouthful. Sorry, Councillor Jennings.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move that in a second, but I just would like to ask a question of the Chief Executive before I do so, if that's okay.
Yes.
So it's the latter part of that resolution talks about maintaining compliance with consent conditions. I'm just wondering why the landfill agreement itself is not referenced in that resolution, because the Section 8 of the landfill agreement obviously speaks quite specifically to our requirements around leachate management from what's termed as the original landfill versus the current or the now recently closed landfill. Is there any benefit in adding in reference to the landfill agreement, or do you see that as not of any value?
Through your worship, look, there's certainly no harm in adding "and the Levin landfill agreement." I would be keen to ensure that we retain consent conditions, because obviously part of the driver behind this is around our relationship with our regulator and demonstrating the work that we're doing to ensure we meet consent conditions. So, yeah, certainly not opposed to the addition.
Yeah. So on with the Chief Executive is very helpful response. I'll move it with that amendment.
So
on the amendment, because it's being moved for the first time.
Right.
So,
Okay. Compliance with consent conditions and the landfill agreement. So Councillor Jennings is moving that. Seconder. Councillor Horry-Kapar, thank you. All right. Those two resolutions are up for discussion and debate. Does anyone wish to speak to them? No one appears to, so I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you again, unanimously. Right, now moving to recommendation F. The Council notes officers will be presenting back a report in December 2025, which takes on board expert peer review and iwi and community advice and voice, to set out the detailed delivery of landfill aftercare actions as provided for in the landfill agreement and the Levin closed landfill management plan. This will provide recommendations to Council specifically on leachate intervention, capping of the old landfill and potential purchase of adjoining land for wetland creation. Happy to move to Councillor Jennings, thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. Again, any further discussion or debate? Councillor Grimstone.
Look, the piece in here that I'd probably like to explore in addition to is the consistent monitoring of the Hokio stream be investigated to be brought back to Council at that time in line with that as a potential option to consider. Not a we will, but if we're going to peer review around best practical options relative to the landfill piece, I'd like us to also think about what the expert view or further information we have around the benefits of considering that continuous monitoring of the Hokio stream.
Probably just a question, did recommendation D not cover that? Simply. endorses an approach to continue enhancing the monitoring framework related to leachate from the old landfill.
So through you, Your Worship, the monitoring framework, which, as you heard from Daniel, is intended to be more than what we are currently doing. We have reached out and want to continue working with parties to finalise that monitoring framework, which I think seeks to achieve the objective that you're seeking. What I'm hearing from you is that you're, in addition to that, you're wanting council to maybe get some advice and be in a position where they were making a decision on the ongoing monitoring of the testing. And it's something that, like, I don't have an allergic reaction to it. It just feels like, from a sequencing perspective, that probably more sits in the monitoring framework part of it than the landfill aftercare mitigation piece. But I'm just looking at Daniel because he might have a way forward.
Yeah, it's effectively ingrained in both of those processes. One of them being we want to engage community to have visibility of the monthly testing regimes, but also the analysis, and then provide their feedback into a process. But ultimately, we need a peer review of the work to date and recommended path forward in order to fulfil a number of requirements, which include coming back to council with certainty around moving with a BPO solution. It's actually required by council to deliver the BPO solution. So in order for council to get a consent to extract groundwater, which does cause effects in the environment in terms of damages to wetland and other matters, we need to have strong evidence as to the reason why we're acting. So it effectively covers that off, and it addresses the current horizons concerns around a time frame for delivery of that BPO. So it's almost a threefold process that ultimately will need to get that expert advice on that related to the monitoring and bring that back to council.
But through you, Worship, if you're seeking an additional level of assurance, Councillor Grimstone, you could add it into this recommendation if that was the will of the table, or alternatively you could consider it an additional recommendation that requested officers report back on the monitoring framework following engagement with community to confirm its commitment to ongoing monitoring and testing of the Hokio stream. I know it achieves the same thing, but it's just they're kind of different.
No, look, I'm happy to accept that, because what I'm really mindful of is the need for council to be explicit around the guidance that it's giving to officers. And I'm guessing as it was fronted in D, it doesn't overtly give me a clear assurance that that would be considered and investigated and brought back. So I'm happy to support it being separated out from the motion and being put to the table, and then the table can decide around that extra level of assurance.
In that case, let's put recommendation F then, unless there's anyone else that wishes to speak to that. All right. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Again, unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Grimstone, do you have some wording that you would like to suggest for a further recommendation?
I'm sure the CE is busy typing an appropriate recommendation that she's going to share that we will use. If we pause for a moment.
I've just sent it to you, Grayson. So the proposed recommendation could read that officers report back the monitoring framework following engagement with PMG and NLG that provides assurance to council on the ongoing commitments to testing of the Hokio stream.
Happy to second.
So Councillor Grimstone's moving that. I've got a seconder from Councillor Boyle, and we'll just get it up on screen so that everybody is comfortable with the wording. So recommendation is G, that officers report back the monitoring framework following engagement with PMG and NLG that provides assurances to Council on the ongoing commitments to testing of the Hokio stream. That is the sense that you were trying to get across. All right, so anyone else wish to speak to that? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. I expect you will be leaving now, I suppose, now that that item has been dealt with. You're welcome to stay, of course, to hear the rest of it, but I think you will get the sense that the fact that all those recommendations were passed unanimously, that this governance table is committed to ensuring that the closed management plan, landfill agreement, whatever it is top of mind, and you know, that we want to see progress and get things done. We're just as concerned with you that, you know, there hasn't been maybe as much progress as we would have liked to have seen, but I think today signals that we're keen to ensure that that continues. So thank you for your participation this afternoon, and we look forward to further communication and conversations with you over the next few months, and good luck to the council that's sitting around the table in December that is going to receive the report. All right, we might just take the opportunity of having a 5-minute break. Thank you. Jacinda and Daniel speak, just move recommendations A and B that we receive the report, recognise this matter or decision as not significant. Seconded by Councillor Young. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Jacinda. Daniel?
Thanks, through you, Worship. So today there's a couple of points that I just wanted to make in regards to the paper for capital carry forwards. One of them is this is an ongoing process for us with the council in terms of regularly revisiting the 5-year program and making sure we've got the projects aligned in the right year and continually coming back to if there are changes. In terms of what's proposed here, we finished the year with $32 million of capital work done last year and the year that we'll be reporting on in the OPR today. In terms of that ongoing program, when we set the annual plan last year, in terms of reprioritizing that 5 years, we ended up with net savings of $4.7 million over that 5-year period. So today, in terms of what the carry forward of $4.842 million delivers, is a further $1 million worth of savings. So what that means is there's effectively $5.9 million of potential capital budget that we could spend if it was needed over the next 5 years without there being an overall impact on the levels of debt that we set during the long-term plan. So it gives us a good level of flexibility while also making sure that we're progressing with these projects, some of the ones that are significantly through completion already. And Daniel is going to address any specific questions around projects.
I do have a question for you, Daniel, actually, because the budget says $52 million for the next 12 months, which I know there's some major projects, especially with the wastewater treatment plant. But do you anticipate at the end of the financial year, June, that we will be through what percentage of that $52 million? Do you anticipate further or larger carry forwards for the following year? Because just worried about the compounding effect, I suppose, in terms of if we're not actually, I know the financial year we're restricted by, but how much that might impact future years.
There is a fairly large project that's going out to tender around the wastewater treatment plants. We've effectively committed to a pathway around that, with fairly significant investment. That comes up in committee, obviously with the commissioners around the price estimate before we go to market. But effectively, we will look to come to council in December for a capital reprioritisation exercise. So we'll be picking up these carry forwards. So the processes for the carry forwards is that all these projects don't necessarily finish at the end of the year. We can certainly provide an updated estimate on where we'll land at year end. So it's really important that through the long-term plan, the budgets are set. Development contributions are collected accordingly, but what we're in a space of doing is actually coming forward with recommendations to council around the timing for delivery of those projects with more certainty. So, at times that does mean that we're pushing some of this investment out, but that's seen as a positive in terms of delivering at the right time.
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just building on your question, essentially, as I understand it, since the long-term plan, we've been really trying to take a program view to acknowledge that projects don't cleanly always fit in within a financial year, that there's obviously some things start in one year, finished in another, or may go over multiple years. And so from a credit rating perspective, our external monitoring bodies look at our delivery and whether we are doing what we're saying we're doing. And so is it correct that as long as we take a program view and that we are delivering over the course of that program, 3-year program or whatever, that sentiment of making sure that we are doing what we're saying we're doing and our external credit rating monitoring agency having confidence in us is sort of satisfied by this type of paper and being really upfront with our community around what we're doing and how things are being delivered across that program view, and managing this carry forward is just a natural part of that.
Thanks, and through your worship, yes, Councillor Jennings, that is the case. So in terms of the conversations we had with SNP when they were here in the last time, they had the conversation with us about the assumptions that they make around that, what they call the haircut on our capital program. So when they're looking at our program of work and what we've budgeted, their estimates in terms of what we'll actually spend, we've been really open with them, and they like our approach in terms of regularly looking at the program and making sure that we're regularly revising it and putting in more realistic estimates as we know them in terms of what we're going to need to spend. And also the other bit in there as well is that our overall picture in terms of the borrowings that we need is not increasing. If anything, it's decreasing where we no longer need it, where our estimates have changed. And so they've been positive in terms of that messaging around the delivery. Probably in terms of the messaging around doing what we said we will, the most significant one for us is in that operational savings space. And so the last couple of years, as you see in the OPR, in terms of delivering in excess of $1 million the year before, and on the 800,000 this year, that's where they really start to look at us shifting our credit rating upwards.
Thanks, Jacinda. Councillor Tamihan.
Kia ora, guys. Thanks, Jacinda, for the paper. It's quite intriguing that I have 3 pages to deal with $52 million worth of capital works, and yet some of the other sections I find quite intriguing that we've got heaps of papers about what would be considered small.
We're only talking about 5 million, not 52.
I suppose I really want to touch on, obviously, the East-West Arterial. I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in the carry forward, because one of the things I picked up in the report was on page 263 was there's a potential risk of the funds not being fully received to deliver the road. So I am interested in what's the backup plan if this project isn't fully funded. How much is already going to be debt funded, and what's the impact on the rates going forward? Because I understand we're looking to pay it down within 3 years, but correct me if I'm wrong. But just looking for some clarity.
The process around the NIF, or formerly CIP, we've been in recent negotiations and requesting a further 12 months, because of the 15 original projects, 3 of them have been quite heavily impacted by the O2NL project and that interface, given that this process started in around about 2020. Specifically north-south wastewater, so that's a wastewater pipe within the O2NL corridor, and also the east-west arterial. So we're at a point now where we've got a high level of confidence that the works will be completed and claimed. So particular to the east-west arterial, that's around the final land acquisition to allow that to be constructed as part of the O2NL project, and also around the relocation of a Kāinga Ora site that was impacted directly by the east-west arterial in terms of physical footprint, but those residents and clients of the site were impacted ultimately by the construction of O2NL and the O2NL Expressway being sandwiched between two roads effectively. So we're well advanced. Council have committed a resolution to build an alternate site. The frames are up, the cladding's on, the roof shout's been done and dusted, I'm assuming, because the roof's on. So confident that we'll have a key in a door before the end of November, and that provides us sufficient time to lodge those claims with NIF in the first quarter of next year. So the risk that we highlighted at time of writing the report was around the ability for our overall program to get the extension to complete the works, but in relation to EWA, high level of confidence we can finish within the currently agreed timeframes, and the majority of that funding is over an extended period of interest-free, and so that allows that to be repaid over that time period. So in general accordance with the commitments of council, so I can speak to EWA has not been at risk.
And the general impact on rates, is there any comment on that?
Yes, we just need to clarify the development contribution part of this.
So this would be recovered by development contribution. So the fact that it's an interest-free loan means that there'd be less cost for the developers ultimately, but as this construction, in the growth area progresses, then those funds would be recovered to repay, and that would include any subsequent costs for council. As council start to repay that loan over a 20-year term, those costs would similarly be added on to the development contribution, which is generally reviewed in a 12-monthly cycle.
Just one last quick comment is, in terms of the long-term plan, we have assumed already in our development contributions anything in relation to the interest-free loan has already been factored in. The development contributions and any interest related to those has already been built into the levies that the development community are paying at the moment.
Can I just ask another question? So in saying that then, can I then ask which development contributions are we talking about? Are we talking about relevant to the area where the infrastructure has been put in? Are we talking about district-wide development contributions that I believe wouldn't be appropriate to use in that way?
For EWA, it's a targeted roading contribution, and it broadens out depending on some of the other infrastructure, whether it's just servicing the Taraika growth area, but specific to Taraika growth area or North East Levin, we have a targeted levy, so it's not funded by the wider Levin or district community. It's targeted to those that benefit.
Councillor Jennings. Yes, so can I just follow on from Councillor Tamihana then, just for absolute clarity. So the Taraika development area has a specific development contributions catchment, so there's a district-wide rate and a Taraika specific roading rate, if I understand it, for that particular catchment.
That's correct, and we're happy to share a link, reshare a link to the policy, which sets out those specific details and projects and the framework.
And then also just for clarity, so as at today, the general ratepayer is not being rated for any borrowing cost or depreciation costs associated with East-West Arterial related assets, right? And any costs associated with them will be met through those development contributions that will come that are currently forecast.
Through your worship, there's just one small point of clarity. So with growth, 100% of anything, any capital and interest costs related with growth are absolutely paid for when they're ring fenced to that catchment, as the legislation requires. They're paid for by any development in that catchment. Once that whole development is operational and we have then a new network of roads, then the ongoing cost of replacement of those then becomes a district-wide rate. So just to clarify that point, yeah.
Probably just one more question from me, and it's just reading through our documents, is there was a really heavy emphasis on Liverpool Street. And so we know that East-West Arterial only goes to Arapaipui Road. Is there an interest in a further link happening to Liverpool Street from East-West Arterial from this council?
There's no current resolution of council to investigate any share path or roading connection through Liverpool Street.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Jacinda. So we now have recommendations C, D, E and F, and I'll do recommendation G separately. Recommendation C, that council approves to carry forward 4.842 million of capital projects into the 2025-26 year as outlined in the report. The council notes that 1.023 million of the capital carry forwards is expected to be funded externally. The council approves to carry forward $81,572 of debt funded operating costs for infrastructure, noting that they will be funded from lower spending in capital projects. And if the council approves to carry forward $276 of debt funded operating costs planned for software to be used for software and innovation projects. Moved by Councillor Brannigan, seconded by Councillor Jennings. Any further discussion? Put these recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. And then recommendation G, that Council provides financial delegation to the Chief Executive to approve the claim for 1.8 million from Waka Kotahi for the Tararua roundabout water main relocation and upgrade in line with the NIFF agreement and PDA agreement with Waka Kotahi. Moved by Councillor Tamihana, seconded by Councillor Jennings. Any further discussion? Put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Alright, 7.3, the Horowhenua Destination Management Plan. And welcome Lisa and Ashley to the table. Just while they're coming up, can I move recommendations A and B, that the report be received and recognised as not significant? Seconded by Councillor Grimstone. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. We're grateful for the opportunity to present this report to you all today. 5 years on from the first Destination Management Plan, the context has changed and it's timely to refresh our approach. This work reflects the commitment signalled in the long-term plan to continue the destination management function and ensure Council can respond to new opportunities, challenges, while aligning with community outcomes and strategic priorities. We're really grateful for the input and support received by you so far. And through you, Your Worship, this report seeks Council's endorsement of the refreshed Destination Management Plan as a strategic framework to guide the sustainable growth and development of the Horowhenua visitor economy, an endorsement of the supporting implementation and metrics framework, noting that delivery will be within existing budget, phased, adaptive and subject to Council's usual planning processes. Thank you for considering this board and attachments, and we welcome any questions or discussion.
Any questions? Councillor Brennan.
Thanks, Luke. Thank you. Great looking plan, and great to see it taking the next step. I recall when the first one was presented to us. So my question's around your work with local groups, and if I look at the Foxton group, for instance, the work they're trying to push, and how we sort of ensure we're linked up there, and sort of working together, paddling the walker, I suppose, in the same direction, etc., etc. And I do note that a number of emails came through last night from Fox in particular around support for the plan, so that's a big up for a start. So just about any commentary around that would be helpful.
Kia ora through you, Your Worship. We've made several attempts and have met a couple of times recently with the Destination Te Awahu Foxton group. They were successful in getting some funding through that we weren't able to use in the Better Off funding to support them with some signage. And so this week I've been in touch with Jason Davey, for example, to give him some information around what he'd need to consider in terms of planning and work with Waka Kotahi. There are several groups though that we're aware of, so the next step in sort of building those relationships, if this were to be endorsed, is to get out there and start talking to all of our key stakeholders.
Thank you, Tim. Easy. All right, so the recommendation in front of us is that Council endorse the refreshed Destination Management Plan and the supporting implementation and metrics framework as a strategic framework to guide the sustainable growth and development of the Horowhenua visitor economy. Moved by Councillor Brannigan and seconded by Councillor Jennings. Anyone wish to speak to it? Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments and thank the team, particularly for the addition of the implementation plan. I think that just as the makes the document feel quite real in terms of what's actually going to happen now in terms of activation. So a big thank you for reflecting some of the feedback and discussion from the last session. And I guess the only other comment I want to say is as an elected member, I really back council being involved in this space, and I think it's really important. And it's particularly important to go on record and say that because, we're in a significant period of reform in terms of local government. We're in an election period where people are talking about core business and core services and essential services and talking about rates affordability. And, this is one of these examples where on its face, it would be really easy to say, council shouldn't do this. This is a waste of money. This is just not core business. But as you understand the space and you see the work that is needed to activate some of this and the things that, all the sort of foundational work that's needed, it reinforces that council does have an important role to play. And so I absolutely believe this is something, even if someone wants to argue that it isn't core business or shouldn't be core business, this is one of these spaces where council should take a lead role. It will return on investment, and it's important that we play in this space. And I'll absolutely justify any day of the week to a member of my community that this is something we should do.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is not the first time that Councillor Jennings and I have walked arm in arm in the journey through local government. But the issue, I did want to address that issue, and I won't repeat the sort of the comments which Councillor Jennings has made around what is and is not core business, other than to say that this is a case where a facile black and white definition of what core business is unhelpful to local government. And so I hope that the fact that we can join together in embracing the destination management plan, I think is a great thing. And this is not fluffy stuff. As Councillor Jennings has said, this is about real economic development. As the paper analyses, there is the ability to realise by 2035 a $30 million return on this. So this is about 6.4% potentially of our local GDP. This is real stuff, but also the non-financial spin-offs, the way that it will really enhance the quality of life of locals, the fact that it will urge us to look better after our natural environment, as well as that, because if we don't have a product which is sensible and attached to our environmental values and so on, then this won't work. So it's a great initiative, 100% support it, and look forward to the next step. And just to acknowledge, it's been said, but let's underline it, that this is not about additional spending. This is about a long-term plan commitment which is already made, already funded for, and let's get on and do it.
Councillor Grimstone.
I completely agree with Councillor Jennings, and it is absolutely nice to be on the same page today with everything so far. I think this, it's an important piece of work. We know that the Horowhenua is a great place to live, and this plan sets out how we're going to tell people about it and get people to come. And that's just as important as economic development, and it goes hand in hand. What I really like about it is that it opens up the opportunity for all areas of our district to participate in becoming or getting involved in a destination, whether it's Shannon, whether it's Waikawa, whether it's Foxton, and adversely to our comment Mays, I actually see a whole list of things that are exciting other than Lewis Farms and RJ's Licorice for coming to live in, being the Adventure Centre, the Trig. I wouldn't mind visiting Tatum as well. That's pretty good. Lake Papatonga, there's a whole lot of stuff that's right here on our doorstep in Levin that we need to celebrate and tell people about. And I think this plan will help us tell our story and open the doors to invite those visitors into all areas of our district, which is cool. So well done to Ashley and Lisa and the team that have delivered this piece of work.
All right, so we have the recommendation in front of us, and it's being moved and seconded, isn't it? Yep. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. unanimously again. Thank you, team. Well done. Great report. Yeah, look, destination management is not something you stop and start. You commit to a bit of a long-term plan in this. So, yeah, congratulations on your progress so far. We look to further progress in the coming years. All right, we're now moving to 7.4, which is the Local Road Improvements Program business case. And like to congratulate the roading team for providing one of the biggest agenda items we've seen in this term. And while James is coming to the table, can I just move receipt of the report? And we're going to do that as a recommendation, so maybe you should talk to it first before we do that, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Council. So I'm talking about this report, which the report is really about addressing critical infrastructure challenges that Council will encounter really from 2029 onwards. Challenges that if we do not address, will undermine our ability to provide a safe and efficient transport network. The O2NL Expressway will change the way people and goods travel through our district, particularly within Levin. Many of our roads have been designed, built and maintained to a lower level of traffic. The realignment of the state highway will cause significant traffic increases on a number of our roads and our intersections. The purpose of the program of works is to adapt our network to these challenges. Our district's strong current and future levels of growth, both residential and commercial, will contribute to this challenge. So it's not solely an O2NL problem, it's a district transport investment planning problem as well. And the program business case itself, the PBC as we've been calling it, it's a tool for identifying, planning and testing the value of the investment that we're planning with this program. The PBC has provided us with a lot of valuable information, but primarily the reason we're doing it is to secure funding through the National Land Transport Program and the National Land Transport Fund through NZTA. In July, we briefed Council on the program business case. We did hear some feedback from Council indicating a strong desire to have more input into shaping the design philosophy of some of the strategically important projects as well as the makeup of the program itself. I'm hopeful that the process we've outlined in the next steps section of the report is within councillors' expectations, but we are always happy to adjust that process as we move through between now and the next LTP. And finally, I'll just briefly mention what the implications of endorsing the program business case actually mean for Council. So in real terms, it means that we can then move to the next stage of the funding application process by submitting the program business case to NZTA. Operationally, it has very limited impact whatsoever. It does not lock Council into an individual project, a set of budgets, or it doesn't allow us to change, it doesn't stop us from changing anything, from adding anything in, or specifically like changing the strategic direction of the program business case. We're expecting more information as we get closer to when the investment is needed, and we're not looking to lock anything down until then, and we want to go through that process to really dial in the investment to align with Council's expectations. And finally, I'll just have to note that it seems that I missed something from the report on page 328. I'll have to apologise for this. I did not include the recommendation to endorse the Horowhenua Local Road Improvements Program business case, and I'm hoping we'll be able to address that today. I'm happy to take any questions.
understand that your mind's on other matters at the moment. Congratulations on becoming a dad. My question, and this was an issue that actually was brought up at last week's developers forum, was around Taurua Road and the development of that area. I wonder when do we start publicising the projects that we've got planned? I know, the long history of Hokea Beach roads included and things like that, which will give, some sort of reassurance to our community that we are got these things in planning ahead.
Tarador Road specifically will be a project where it'll be the first cab off the rank at this stage is our plan. So generally when we're planning these types of capital works, we like to do the direct engagements with affected residents and parties at the start. We tend to find that if you learn that the road outside your property is going to be completely done up in the newspaper rather than directly from the people doing it, you have a worse reaction. So we like to do that targeted engagement first, and we like to be fairly confident with where we're going before we start that real public notification process, so we can be clear on what we're doing. We're still in early days with that project in the program itself. But we want to be at a stage where in 27, 28 we're ready to start investment and start building the project. We've got some time, but we do need to make progress within the next 18 months, closing off that process.
Thanks, James. Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, thanks, James. The section under next steps was very helpful, thank you. And so just to reinforce from my complete understanding that if an elected member had a great idea and had a particular project that they wanted to put on the table, for example, like a connection from Liverpool Street over to the east-west arterial, that could be put forward and through an LTP process. There'd obviously need to be some political support, but that the PBC doesn't prevent that from happening in terms of ideas and proposals being put into the mix.
Yes, thank you. That's absolutely correct. We can't expect to have all the information now. We're expecting that the program will not look exactly like it does in the program business case once we start delivering. There's a lot of uncertainty, and there'll be more ideas that come into it.
So,
Yes, Tammy Hanna.
are you able to expand on the answer for us, James, just for the public to understand what Councillor Jennings was asking you then?
Yes, certainly I can expand on that. So the program business case, it's an early part where we're identifying the best ways we think with the information we have right now to address the problems that we're foreseeing. It's not locking down the investment, it's not committing to funding or projects that happens at the long-term plan process. The program business case will be reviewed prior to the 2027 LTP, that's our current plan, and the program will be redefined. So the estimates in the program and the program business case itself, the full value of the program, it's not within the current budget that we have currently in the long-term plan. So we know that we have to make changes to the program between now and then. If there's still a lot of uncertainty and variables with what the district's transport network and the challenges will look like at that point. There's a lot of transport modelling that it seems we get a different change every time something with the O2NL project changes. As the level of growth changes, we need to adapt and tailor our level of investment to match that. So projects that are in the program may not be the right investment once we have more information in the future. And there may be information we have in the future that leads us to projects that we don't have currently in the program. Have I covered that off? Do you?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose the nuts and bolts of it for me really was I asked a question earlier about whether there was an appetite of this council to link EWA to Liverpool Street, and was told there was no resolution as such or direction as such, but actually I've heard the contrary now by Councillor Jennings that in fact there is an appetite. So I suppose my concern is for the people that own land. The other concern I probably have is that how that would be operated, because if there was no EWA there, would we still have the same opportunities to acquire land if it wasn't there?
So, through your worship, I think just to clarify, James was responding to a question about process. He wasn't responding to a question of substance around that particular direction of travel, which Councillor Jennings was using as an example, and that's really a question for Councillor Jennings to comment on.
Okay, I'll retract that, but I just want the public to know that there's other stuff going on. I do have a few questions though. One of them in your report, you talked about iwi and the MCA process that went on, but it didn't actually indicate to us what the iwi position was around the local roading, and particularly around EWA, where it was highlighted that there was an MCA process. Can I get feedback about where they were?
So iwi engagement through the program business case has been light or not a lot at all, to be upfront. And that's not to say there's no intention. In the next steps section, we've got the intention to engage directly with local iwi and hapu at a project level. The strategic input from iwi hapu into the program business case is filtered through earlier work through the Horowhenua integrated transport strategy. So that was developed quite closely. The program business case, it's a process it's within I suppose the realms of NZTA's funding process. It's quite difficult to have good practical engagement of real world problems at project level and utilise that local knowledge when we're restrained by this sort of funding application process. We have to go through the specific NZTA process. What I'm basically trying to say is that we feel iwi engagement is going to be best served, we'll get the most value out of it, and we believe iwi and HUP will get the most value out of it at the project level itself. So that's within the next steps. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but it doesn't give me any confidence in terms of actually just getting a direct answer about where iwi sat on it. And we have people in the project that I would have thought could have provided or shared to our community about actually where iwi stand on some of these projects. Anyway, I'll leave that one there. Am I allowed to continue? I've got a couple more questions. I just would like to understand in this business case, what does it look like for Foxton with the inception of O2NL? What can you align me to, what can you lead me to in this report that gives Foxton community confidence that they are on the radar of HDC, and how we're going to prepare Foxton for a new stream of traffic, I'll put it that way.
Yes, that's a good question. So there are projects identified in the program business case focused on within Foxton. And as you say, they're related to the future effects of the expected increase of traffic on State Highway 1. Foxton will effectively be the first town on the State Highway heading north from Wellington post O2NL once Levin is bypassed. So we expect the demand change in Foxton to be quite strong. There is a lot of basically the program business case has identified challenges in Foxton, quite similar to existing challenges in Levin, where the state highway causes what we describe as severance with the town. It makes it difficult to connect one side with the other. It's difficult to move from one side to the other. It's a very real transport impact on the community in Foxton. So there are projects included. We are somewhat restricted because where the need is on the state highway. We have actually included projects in the program business case for consideration for investment on the state highway. There's not a lot of certainty on how that could work from a funding perspective. We somewhat included those projects to really push the perspective that we believe there's a problem here. We want investment in there. We want attention drawn to it. There's other avenues that we're working alongside the community in Foxton as part of the Foxton Futures Group to bring NZTA's focus onto the issues in Foxton itself. But yeah, I think by and large you could look at the program business case and say it's a program that's focused mainly in Levin, and that's true to an extent, but the impacts of Otuna are not limited to Levin. They affect the whole district. So there is consideration outside Levin, yeah.
Thanks for the clarity and reminding me too about Foxton Futures and what they're doing in that space as well. But I think they need to be complementing one another, and if we're not identifying early in our PBC about how we're going to treat such an important issue for Foxton and the community and connectivity, then I would indicate that we need to give much more assurance to our community that we are actually already considering what's required there. My next question is Kiwi Rail. That came up heavily in your report in terms of shared assets, shared areas. What does that look like for us moving forward, given we've got conversations around revocation and things, but what would you say is a priority for us in how we build on the relationship with Kiwi Rail and get the outcomes we need to see? Because I'm interested in how even the funding works between us and them, if that's something. Sorry, James, I know it's probably really hard. Maybe you don't have to answer me today, but I am certainly interested in what that relationship looks like, given that we've got a large number of Kiwi Rail crossings within our entire district that we have to keep upgraded and working. So maybe not today.
Yeah, I would like to answer that as fulsome as I could. It is difficult. Like in general terms, I feel that council has a very strong relationship with Kiwi Rail at the moment. Stronger than I think it's been since I've been at council. We're working relatively collaboratively with Kiwi Rail, but you're right in identifying that we have parallel streams of work, that it's essential that we collaborate with the work with the increased train service and how Kiwi Rail are investigating the safety impacts of the increased service on the level crossings, the investment and the responsibility of that. There's a lot of work and a lot of unknowns we have from here to when the investment needs to start. It's a good question. I don't have a clear direction, and I expect it's something that will be workshopping with elected members a lot more over the next 18 months.
And my final question, if I'm allowed, sorry. In your professional opinion, James, I'd like to ask you, we're committing a huge amount of resource to East West Arterial. And I would like, in your professional capacity, to explain to me if that type of a project is actually potentially taking away from critical upgrade and maintenance work that we actually need to be undertaking in our district.
James, I just want you to know that you don't need to answer that question if you don't have the information in front of you to answer it, because it is unfair to put you on the spot to ask you to do that.
Yeah, I
don't feel it's unfair, Monique. I'm actually asking a question that's relevant to the report. So if James isn't able to answer me, that's fine, and I'm happy to take it in writing later, but I don't think it's an unfair question at all.
I'd be comfortable providing, I suppose, a limited answer, and I'd appreciate the opportunity to expand on it if council would be happy with it. But broadly, the east-west arterial is critical. My understanding is the east-west arterial is critical for the transport needs of the Tara Ika growth area. Basically, without it, it's putting too much reliance on the Queen Street and Tararua Road intersections. And my understanding is that those intersections across Arapaipai Road will have significant level of service issues if there's not an additional connection provided. I'd like the opportunity to have a more thorough answer. I'm more verbally relaying my understanding versus giving you a proper professional assessment of the requirements. Sorry. So, could I just ask a question through the Chief Executive? Point of order. Councillor Tamihara just made a comment which I believe was directed to me, and I believe it's inappropriate, and I think it should be asked to withdraw.
Councillor Tamihara, I'd like you to withdraw that remark. I did hear it, and it was a personal comment that was unnecessary.
I'll retract the remark of truth.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's point of order. That's an unacceptable comment. If Councillor Tamihara, and actually, no, I'll leave it with you, Mr. Mayor, as Chair, and then I do have a question for the Chief Executive.
That added comment was unnecessary, Councillor Tamihara. It seems to me that you have no genuine attempt to actually withdraw that comment at all by that added comment.
Happy to withdraw the comment.
Thank you. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
The question to the Chief Executive in relation to Councillor Tamihara's question is it correct to say that Council is absolutely committed to the east-west arterial route in terms of both the Otamanao project, but also as a result of the district plan change associated with Taraika, and that even though some members around this table might not agree with the project, at the moment it is committed, it is baked into our LTP process, it is baked into district plan, and so even though a particular individual might have views about that project, Council is absolutely committed to the east-west arterial route project, and that is why it's reflected in the PVC.
Through your worship, yes, that's correct, and that's the delegations that you've given the Chief Executive when signing off on the EWA. Can I just further add, because one of Councillor Tamihara's parts of his question was about is EWA taking away investment into other critical transport infrastructure? Let's remind Council that EWA is not being funded by the ratepayer. It is funded via grant through National Infrastructure Fund and via development contribution levies as sourced via the catchment around it.
Can you provide it in writing? Because that's not my understanding. It clearly shows we're still debt funding $4.7 million of a project, and there's ongoing future costs as well. But I could be wrong.
We'll get that clarified, but I'm confident that the questions have been answered by a number of by Daniel and Jacinda earlier in terms of where that funding was coming from and what ratepayer money was going to be used. James, can I just change tack and ask you around NZTA's role here, because this business case now has to go to them for approval, I assume, and where if they don't agree to it or they say that that's not going to happen, the funding for these projects needs to be actually accepted by them because they're paying a reasonable share of it through our FAR rate.
Yes, that's correct. So as a little bit of background for everyone, for the public, the Council has a subsidy from the National Land Transport Fund, which is administered by NZTA. Currently, they pay for 61% of our land transport expenditure, with some exceptions. And we are intending for this work to be funded in a similar mechanism. We want to explore some opportunities for perhaps a higher subsidy rate for some projects where the impacts are really mainly we have to do it because of the Otaki to north of Lisbon Expressway, but I put that as a side. The process of submitting to NZTA is a little bit opaque, I could say. So we have been working with NZTA for the development of the program business case closely. They've been at every workshop, every meeting to get it to the point it's currently at. Our investment advisors have reviewed it, they're comfortable with it. The next stage is having it with the NZTA board for the consideration. So in the past, there were, I understood, like a locked down process about it goes to the board, they endorse it or approve it, and then there's a following on stage. So sometimes you can get a program business case and then some of the projects need individual, a single stage or detailed business cases to justify them. And once they're submitted, the funding can actually be allocated into the National Land Transport Program. We're hoping to minimise the next steps of funding with funding application. We want to spend like the least amount of our time and our funding on further business case work and more on actual building infrastructures is really the ultimate goal. But I can't give you a solid answer. We will learn more quickly once it's submitted, and we'll keep council appraised of the next steps as we learn them.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, James. Extremely detailed report. Appreciate it, all the work that's gone on to that. So, first of all, let me just move the council receive and note the report, Local Road Improvements Program Business Case, seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And then the next recommendation is that council endorse the Local Road Improvements Program Business Case. Happy to move, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen again. Is there any further discussion or debate on that recommendation? Put that recommendation, all those in favour? Against? Carried.
Well, I had pushed my button.
Oh, pardon? Sorry, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, unfortunately, while I agree and the great work that's gone on here by James and the transport team, given the questions I've raised today and the concerns about how we're prioritising our funds, I couldn't possibly support this today, so I won't be supporting it. Kia ora.
So Councillors Tamihana's against that endorsement is recorded. Thank you. I'm conscious we have need to have a break for lunch in a minute, but we'll just get 7.5 out of the way first, which is the update to elected members' allowances and reimbursement of expenses policy. And Grayson's going to talk to this, but just move recommendation A that we receive the report, seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Welcome, Grayson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, this report updates the elected members' allowances and reimbursement of expenses policies following the amendments to the Local Government Members 2025-26 Determination 2025. It updates the mileage allowance and introduces a home security reimbursement and increases the childcare allowance from after the 2025 election. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Grimstone.
Yeah, Grayson, could you, I guess the policy or change steps out the process that the CE would step through to ascertain whether the security allowance was required. Could you just expand on what that would look like in practice for that determination to be made?
So that will be determined by the nature of the security threat. The details that we would follow would be to engage an appropriate person to undertake an assessment and come up with some recommendations. It may be that could be done in-house. Again, it depends on the nature of the security threat.
Could you expand potentially on some examples of what security threats to elected members could look like?
What we can point to is through New Zealand and internationally, there's been an increase in some activities directed at elected members. We don't want to specifically go into details of what they might be, lest they give ideas to people, and we generally wouldn't comment too far. But usually the sorts of things would be things that would concern an elected member to the point that they would need to raise it, and that we would consider those further.
I suppose in some ways, though, Grayson, this is like a bit of reactive policy rather than a proactive policy. You're waiting for something to happen before you install a security system, which, yeah, there's different ways of looking at that, I suppose.
What we do as part of an induction for new councillors is go through personal security and equip local members with skills and knowledge that they will need to manage their security situation. This has unfortunately become a necessary part, and it's been lobbied for by some local members around the country, and it's there should it be necessary. But our aim is always to try and maintain the safety and security of elected members ahead of time. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you. It's a shame we're talking about it, to be honest, but anyway. All right. So, any further questions of Grayson? Thank you, Grayson. Appreciate that. And we have recommendations B, C, and D in the agenda. B, the council note the changes to vehicle kilometre rates and childcare reimbursement rates incorporated from the local government members 2025-26 determination 2025. C, that council approves the amendments to the policy clarifying the definition of council business in relation to community board members requiring expenses and allowances to be claimed for within 3 months of them falling due, and introducing a home security allowance reimbursement. The council note the home security reimbursement and the increase in the childcare reimbursement will be available to members from the day after the return of the election results for the 2025 local body elections. The home security reimbursement will also be available based on recommendations from the security threat and risk assessment authorised by the Chief Executive. Moved by Councillor Horridge Parr, seconded by Councillor Young. Any further discussion? Put those recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, and we will now take an adjournment for lunch and be back at 2:05. Thank you. performance report for September, and just move the recommendation the council receive and note the report organisation performance report for September 2025, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? Does the Chief Executive wish to introduce the report?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, she does. So, presenting to you what is the final organisation performance report for the Terranium, and while you'll note in the report, significant progress against a number of tactical priorities that Council set as as where our focus needed to be over the last 18 months in particular, I want to particularly draw your attention to the financial overview in the report. Obviously, we've previously presented to Council via email an update on our year-end results 30 June. Through the Capital Project Steering Group, we had presented in some detail our completion of 31.2 million against the of the capital program, but what I do want to particularly highlight is the underlying operating result. Last year Council set us a savings target of $1 million. In addition to that, you endorsed the direction of travel around bringing waters in-house, but you also you sought us as an organisation to continue to focus on finding savings and finding different ways of doing things. You'll note earlier this year we projected a 300 to 500k savings objective, and really proud of the team that we have been able to achieve a net savings of 800k, which I think should give you as elected members that continued confidence around the culture of the organisation in terms of the laser focus on financial discipline and management, which, as you know, started with a focus on zero-based budgeting, but has continued with a focus around, questioning every opportunity to see whether we could find additional savings. In the report, you'll also note the final SSP report. When you receive the draft annual report, which is currently being audited and hopefully will be presented to you on the 8th of October for your consideration, some of the content will feel really similar, and that's because obviously we've produced the financials and the SSPs for year end. And just in closing, kind of particularly draw a spotlight on our kaimahi. Thank you to those councillors that were able to attend our recent Matariki Kaimahi Awards, where we acknowledge all staff, but in particular those staff who really deliver on our pursuit for a culture of excellence and service. And so I just want to acknowledge that in the report we celebrate some of those worthy recipients. GMs are here, and between them and I, we're happy to answer any specific questions.
Questions, comments on the report? Councillor Grimstone.
Look, my question evolves around a very interesting photo about tractor pumps, and just what do two tractor pumps do, and how do they help our resiliency all the way from Italy? So just a little bit more context on what it would do in the use.
Yeah, tractor pumps don't do much without being attached to a tractor, but the idea behind it is part of the Foxton Resilience Group, which Horizons have been leading out on, attached to some central government funding and co-funding also from HDC, is that it was proposed to purchase 2 large tractor pumps, and they can be used in the case of emergency works. We regularly have one set up at the bottom of the King's Canal on Persol Street, and so that effectively pumps water from that drain in big events over into the Foxton Loop. But we can, through the capacity, utilise them for other events. I know in 2016 we had challenges over in Shannon where the Nero wastewater treatment plant where the pumps on site couldn't keep up so we would be able to pump in that situation, or farming properties that had challenges with a failed static pump down the end of the Aratongata out Koputaroa, so we get out there in a case of emergency, we can set these pumps up. So very much doing some trial runs to look at where we could station them in known areas, but also having the ability to spread ourselves a bit more wider in the case of a large emergency.
Deputy Mayor Al.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I refer to page 526. Standard & Poor's, the A+ credit rating, and I note Jacinta did reference it earlier, but just a question of in terms of the on balance, how things are looking. So it's they do note the improved operating surpluses, the solid financial management, which the CE referenced earlier, tighter expenses control, but also the risks around our debt levels in Three Waters. So a question on balance, how do you feel things are looking in terms of our credit rating moving forward?
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Through you, Your Worship, I think overall in the conversations with them about when we could expect a credit rating increase, because we definitely did have this conversation when they delivered back the result that we were hoping would come sooner, is that as the Three Waters program and the local water Stonewall rolls out more, there'll be more certainty of exactly what's happening for our council. And there was a fair amount at the time, but it wasn't as far along as it is now. So that's one element. So probably in the next, broadly, I'd say in the next 12 to 18 months, we would expect one, because they did mention as well that they'd like to see us deliver on balancing the budget, which is expected in 27-28. So you would expect to definitely see something by then, but you would hope potentially that we would see maybe the negative outlook remove in this next round, as there was more certainty around the Three Waters.
Councillor Tommy Hunter. Hey guys, if you can bear with me again, a couple of questions. I'm just really interested in following on from Deputy Mayor Allen actually around the debt. I wonder if we could just take us through the debt that we've incurred in the last 12 months would be useful to understand, because when I went through the report, I went to each of the financial statements attached to each of the reports, land transport, waters, wastewater, solid waste, and I'm probably just a little bit concerned that I've seen in every one of those a level of debt increase. So I just would really like some understanding about how much we're still borrowing and why we have to keep borrowing. And maybe I've misread the reports, but that's what's come through.
Thanks, Councillor Tamihana, through you, Your Worship. So absolutely, we are still borrowing. And so the key reasons why we are borrowing are firstly for the capital program, is we're borrowing so that those, essentially from an intergenerational equity perspective, or to make sure that those that benefit from that investment are paying for it over time. So if we're investing in, for example, the $15 million treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we are borrowing to do that, and then we are recovering that money over the life that's expected for that treatment plant to operate, so that each year those that are using that treatment plant can play a portion of that, and that's recovered through what we call depreciation. So when we talk about funding our depreciation, rather than asking for rates right up front for that 15 million, we borrow that, and then over that life of the 80 to 100 years that it's going to last, we recover a bit each year through rates to then repay that borrowings. So for long-term investments, that's absolutely the standard in terms of what you do. On the other side, we'll borrow early when we invest for growth, and then we'll recover that through development contributions, and that's because we need to invest and make sure that that infrastructure is there in advance of development. In terms of the operating side of the business, the financial strategy that we set back in 2021, and it's continued since then, is to move away from using any debt for operating purposes. We still do have a level of debt that this council signed off, particularly in the Three Waters area where we have some debt-funded operating costs. We used to fund some of our recycling costs through debt. We don't do that anymore. And so increasingly that's being wound back to the point where by 27-28, We won't have any debt-funded operating costs other than those costs which might benefit a number of years over a long time span period. So it's normal to use debt for the long term, but for day-to-day operating costs by 27-28, that shouldn't be the case anymore.
Sorry, can I just ask though, what was the amount we've borrowed in this last financial year total?
I'll have to double check the exact amount for you in terms of what the change is. It's 174 million net now. I can quickly look and then tell you what that change is between last year and this year.
Thank you for that, Jacinta. And just subsequent to that, because you raised development contributions, I am interested, and I don't need the answer now, but I am interested in what we've borrowed to support development, and I'm very interested in how much we've received from development contributions. And is it based on fact or assumption? But I don't need that answer now. Apologies. Page 638 was around develop and implement a catchment management plan for stormwater, and I note we haven't achieved it. I'm sensing it's urgent. I'm just wondering what's happening with that particular item. Catchment management plan work of phase 1 development, and it's not happening. Is this a stormwater?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. We have been in terms of a process of, there was originally draft catchment management plans developed around about 4 years ago. We have not finalised and brought them through to council. There's a number of work streams that are progressing linked to that, including the recent LIDAR survey that will help inform hotspots. So yeah, I can take an action to bring a more detailed update around that particular item.
Sorry, Councillor Tamihana, I just want to come back to your question about the debt. So 30 June 24, our net debt position was 164. 30 June 25, our net debt position is 174, so that's a 10. Noting that 30 June 24, our net to debt operating income revenue ratio was 214%, and we have improved that ratio down to 198% in the last 12 months. And across those kind of the operating activity statements that you're looking at, what you can be assured of is that any borrowings are consistent with what was adopted by this table during the long-term plan and the annual plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Grimstone. Yeah, look, maybe a question for Monique, because I don't think Nikki's here, but I'm just keen on page 580, you've made reference to the Spark of Life project, and in your preamble introducing the report, you spoke about zero-based budgeting, looking at efficiencies to deliver savings. Can you maybe share the aspirations for the continued work that this particular initiative should deliver to our ratepayers?
Yeah, so Te Mauri Hikoa is about creating the space in our organisation for our people to think differently about how we do work. And ultimately, we want that to achieve processes, services and outcomes that make things better, faster, smarter and easier, which ultimately should support cost savings across the organisation.
I'll continue. Page 640, just noticing in the Māori engagement framework it's saying that it's not achieved. Is that just a misprint, or is that where we are?
So the iwi hapu engagement framework was not adopted by council by 30th of June, and this particular report, SSPs, we have to report on by 30 June. So next year it will be green because we've adopted it, but this specific report is up until 30 June for SSPs. So it's correct, it's just not, doesn't reflect today. And we have to tell audit what that looks like as of 30 June, not what it looks like today.
Thanks, Monique. And I'm just noting too that the Māori aspiration one is another one not achieved, so just wanted to note it. But one thing I did note not in here, especially in property, was the right of first refusal policy. I just sort of wondered why that's not encapsulated anywhere in the report, given it's a policy we've adopted.
So the first rights of refusal policy, you're right, was adopted by Council in May 2025. It was reported in the last organisation performance report. And no doubt you'll see it reflected somewhere in the annual report, but it's not linked to an SSP and it's not linked to the particular reporting period, which is July to September.
Okay, I get that. I suppose the reason I thought it might have been relevant was because some of the decisions being made recently where it hasn't been applied, so I sort of thought it might have sat on here as a risk, whatever you want to call it, but that's fine. My last one is cemeteries.
That's fair feedback, Councillor Tamihana. We'll take that on board.
And just noting on page 658, there's an issue around our district cemeteries space running out. I'd just like to know what our plan is. Are we looking at land acquisition for that? Just there's nothing in the report to tell me.
Yeah, from memory, we reported on that through capital projects, but I'll just hand over to Lacey to talk to that.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Your Worship. That our Chief Executive is correct. We currently have a capital program for cemetery development in both Levin and and Shannon for this financial year, as well as some exploration at Foxton Cemetery, knowing that we did work in Foxton last financial year, and there's some work through the long-term plan which is coming up either next financial year or the following financial year.
Councillor Grimstone. A question for Jacinta, whether she could expand a little bit more. Within the report on page 589, there's the commentary around this council having the 7th lowest cost of funds borrowed in comparison to other councils working with Bancorp. So this is something that was raised at the Risk and Insurance Committee during the last meeting. But in theory, what does that mean? And what has it taken in order for council to have achieved being the 7th lowest cost of funds for those managed by Bancorp?
Thanks, and through your worship, ultimately what it means is that there are less costs for the ratepayer. So ultimately that's a good story for the ratepayer in terms of needing less interest. So overall, anything we've saved in that realm has gone directly back to repay debt, because if we haven't needed it, that's where any extra savings have gone. In terms of how we've achieved that, that's been through regular monthly collaborative meetings with our treasury advisors to look at what's happening in the market, look at what we need from a capital perspective, try and make sure we understand really clearly when we're going to need to spend the money, and work to project what we need out and try and make the best decisions we can in terms of the lowest interest rate. Some of that sometimes can be a little bit in terms of when timing and when that interest needs to, or that new debt comes on stream, but we do work very closely with our treasury advisor on
it. Daniel, I had a couple of questions around the issues and risk regarding stormwater, and one was around the accretion of the coastline at Wairariri Beach and the risk that poses for future councils, and then also the rising coastal groundwater issue. Again, what sort of risk, or where should we be making sure that risk is looked at over for the next council?
Yeah, speaking to the direct reason for raising that risk is around regularly every decade or so we progress as the beach accretes a metre every year. We find that our stormwater outlets get submerged, so we've got to go and extend them. And just concerns being raised with the team around our ability to just keep extending them. And in engineering terms, there's some fairly simple solutions at a point where effectively the water won't flow downhill. We'd need to put a pump station in. So it's not to say there isn't a solution, but it's just really highlighting that over a longer term, if that accretion was to continue on that plan, and certainly, around over more of a 100-year cycle, some of those issues do need to be on the radar, which is what that wider stormwater catchment management planning and some of our work around climate change and resilience would acknowledge and be linked to.
So, I suppose the question: how much did we extend the pipes last time, and was that really, sufficient to be able to? Well, the accretion must be significant if each year, if that's already outgrown what we installed there.
Yeah, the extending is the easy part. The consenting is where it gets a bit more complex. So we try not to do it too regularly. So if we think about a 10-year period, there's only so far we can put the pipes extending out into the area where cars effectively drive. So they haven't been done for some time, and you'd likely see the next extension encroaching 5 to 10 metres past the footprint of the dunes. But there's a couple of those that we've got concerns that they just may not function adequately, and the maintenance cost to continue to clean them out. Because as the beach moves further away, effectively, the level has to flatten off to get there, which has the reverse effect on groundwater that effectively slows up that underwater ground path over a long term in terms of ability for groundwater to drain.
And the other question around Foxton Beach, I mean, it seems like every time we're going to have significant rain, we're going to get the risk of quite significant ponding and flooding in that area, are we? The groundwater levels being so high.
A lot of the Foxton Beach already have stormwater pump stations, so some of those outfalls, there's around about 7, are already under a pump station type scenario. If we think of the area over the back of what's called Carrick's Grove, it's effectively a big bathtub in terms of it doesn't drain to the sea currently. So in the case of the water not being able to seep into the ground, we effectively need to operate a pump station to relieve that site, which is in place.
And sorry, my other question was around the UV disinfection installed at Foxton Beach. And that relates to changes in the water services delivery requirements for drinking water. Are we making our drinking water in those places better by this disinfection? Or there's often criticism for the taste of water in that area. Or is this going to improve it?
Won't impact the taste. Certainly anything around filtering would impact on taste. For the end user, it's more around having confidence in resilience of treatment. So not just relying on the chlorination. There's additional layers of treatment to ensure the health and safety or cleanliness of the water more so than the taste. Just continuous, enhancing national standards in that space for compliance.
Okay, thank you. Again, very comprehensive and thorough report that we want to acknowledge the work that's gone into producing that, and the answers, I'm sure, that if anyone in the community is curious about what is going on within this organisation, we'll have plenty of answers to see. All right, let's move on to 8.2, the Council Resolution Actions Monitoring Report for September. I'll move receipt of this report, seconded by Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items on that report that people wish to highlight or ask clarification on? All right, moving to 8.3, the long-term plan 2024-44 actions monitoring report, and move receipt and note of that report. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Again, any items on that report that people wish to seek further clarification on? All right, moving to 9.1, the proceedings of Te Awaho Foxton Community Board, 18th of August 2025. We note the report to be received and noted. We also have a recommendation which Ashley and John are coming to talk to us about, but just move that. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just want to cover off a little bit of background first before we get into the report, and then I'll hand over to Chair John Girling. So the Foxton Beach Endowment Fund was established under the Reserves and Other Lands Disposal Act in 1968. Our current policy was adopted in 2009. There was the need for a more structured and inclusive policy framework had become evident to ensure that the fund continued to deliver the benefit for the community, aligned with more of our modern governance expectations, and reflected the values and the priorities of the community. In response to that, a working group comprising of representatives of the Te Awaho Foxton Community Board, Kirikiri Ward Councillors, Horowhenua Māori Ward Councillors, and the descendants of Papangaio J Block was created. The draft policy was formed over many workshops, and previously the draft policy was endorsed by TAFCB and Council for public consultation. During consultation, we held 2 drop-in sessions and a community meeting. Roughly 23 people were engaged with during this process. There was material provided across Foxton and Foxton Beach, including delivery to every household within the Foxton Beach community. 24 pieces of feedback were received, with 60.8% in support of the policy, the draft policy. The key message that came from the feedback was around retaining the $5 million cap to safeguard the fund. In response to that, the revised policy, which is up for adoption today, includes the mechanism, includes reintroducing the $5 million cap, and includes a mechanism that requires caution by having a business case that aligns with the principles of the policy and needs to be approved by council to drop below the $5 million. This allows for investment still to be made to grow the fund. With the fund's ongoing growth and sustainability remaining a top priority. On the 18th of August, TAFCB unanimously endorsed the policy to be referred to Council for formal adoption. I will hand over to John Girling.
Thank you, Ashley. I think you've covered the operation side of it very well. What I will add to this is that we did have very good consultation with everyone involved, including iwi, and quite frankly, I think we've come to a very sensible solution, and we put it forward for your support.
Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for John or Ashley? There appear to be none. Thank you very much. So the recommendation is that Council adopts the revised Foxton Beach Endowment Fund policy incorporating community feedback. Have a mover, Deputy Mayor Allen, and seconded by Councillor Tamihana. It's on the table. Does anyone wish to speak to it? Deputy Mayor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Foxton Beach has a habit of turning out in great numbers where there is a consultation process underway, unless they are very happy with the draft proposal. And I think the fact that there are only 23 feedback forms, 17 members of the public who came to the public meeting, did not indicate apathy, but rather an acceptance broadly of the proposal that was contained within the draft. Even though the feedback was limited, it was very valuable, and it did touch on a number of issues. Ashley's mentioned the issue of the cap, a strong feeling that that fund must be well managed and well looked after, and the proposal, which if adopted we will go with, that there be a strong business case if we do wish to go under that case, under the 5 mil, I think will meet those concerns. I think the other thing I particularly want to note with a great deal of joy and satisfaction is that this policy now is much wider than just applications for funding for projects, which is sort of what it has been in the past. It now looks much more widely towards the environment, towards cultural issues and so on. It's a much more embracing policy. I did say at the community board meeting, and I do say it again, even it's in the document, but any concerns about unelected decision making or decision making by unelected members is simply not the case. This is about inclusion, and in particular inclusion of the descendants of the Papanao block. It's so important that they are part of the future and that they are part of the working group which will look at any applications in future. They will sit alongside the community board, representatives from them, a true partnership, but to be absolutely clear, final decisions at the end of the day will be made through a formal meeting of the community board making recommendations to this council, which under the legislation it can only be elected members sitting at a council table who can actually make the final decisions. So, Mr. Mayor, I do want to end it with some thanks, and we often acknowledge officers for the sterling work they do behind the scenes, but on this particular occasion, I say it with a deep sincerity, the work undertaken by Jacinda and Grayson, and in particular by Ashley, to keep us on track, to make sure that this issue was nailed before October the 11th. I say with gratitude, thank you very much for the way that you've done it. It's been herding cats at times, but the cats came together. I also want to acknowledge the community board and the public meeting where our chair, John Girling, fronted the issue and walked through the slides with members of the public. Acknowledge you, John, for the work you did there. And also the other members, elected members, be it the Māori Ward councillors, Nina Hori Tapa, Justin Tamihana. Thank you too for your involvement, and also my fellow councillor from Kirikiri Ward, Ross Brannigan. And could I acknowledge also Hayden Tūroa? He shouldered the business. He did so much mahi in terms of making sure that we had a robust process, and I really thank Hayden for the work he did on behalf of those descendants of Papanao block. So this is an historic moment, and I think we have a policy now that is much richer, more detailed, and will only be to the benefit of them, the community of Foxton Beach.
Thank you, David. Councillor Tamihana.
Thanks for the opportunity as a seconder. I just actually want to endorse the words that Deputy Mayor Allen has shared. I think it's been a really robust process, and while the engagement at times was light, the engagement that was there was passionate. There were a few other things I think that were maybe not spoken about today, but things that we went through along the lines of they didn't like the cap removal. There was also the questioning around the 100% funding of projects. There was no overall asset based determination given between all of their fund, the endowment. There was questions raised around the use of the funds outside of Foxton Beach. And another one that's come up to me as well has actually been around right of first refusals on endowment properties. And so I think it's still a matter that's probably sitting alongside our lease review process that we're undertaking as a council. But I really want to endorse the policy today. I really want to endorse you, John Girling, the chair of the Te Awaho Community Board, and your group. I think you guys have done an outstanding job in the way you've engaged this and the wider community. And again, whoever David's mentioned, I also want to acknowledge, especially you, Ashley. I think you really held the line in this regard, and you worked with every part of the community to ensure they felt heard, felt like they were participated in the process, and the consultation was meaningful, and I think that means a lot in terms of building our trust back with our community. So congratulations, everyone.
Councillor Brannigan.
Yeah, just want to concur with the previous comments from Councillor Tamihana and Deputy Mayor Allen. I think the fact the other bit around this is that it'll be this policy will be supported by the strong and sustainable investment approach, as well as the property utilisation strategy, which will help direct where that investment might come from and how we deal with, I suppose, and manage the properties that are still under the endowment fund. So I think they're important bits of work that will give effect to this policy and make it, like I say, strong and sustainable for the future. So, yeah, great bit of work and well done to everybody.
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting this. I've articulated previously some of my concerns and hesitations around this, and just to reiterate, I don't really like when we have a document that points to another document that doesn't yet exist in terms of the utilisation strategy. I've got concerns around I think there's a bigger conversation, a bigger question mark around our financial strategy in terms of our approach to funding of assets and debt management. And so the other concern I have with the policy is that it kind of seems to prioritise or focus on what might be termed as bells and whistles or nice to haves, rather than what the fund's role is in relation to key assets and how it might be utilised or considered through an LTP process in terms of infrastructure that Foxton Beach may require. Because obviously if you take the rest of the district where surplus property or property holdings are disposed of, the reduction in debt benefits the entire district. And so I get that this fund is ring-fenced, there's specific legislation, there's specific history, but I don't think that removes the need or the obligation of this council table to consider how the fund should be used for, as I say, just run-of-the-mill core infrastructure projects rather than what might be termed as the bells and whistles. So there's some complexity to it, and I can't go through it in the 5 minutes today, but that's just sort of a snapshot of why I'm not a fan of where we've landed up. I acknowledge all of the significant work. There's obviously huge community buy-in, so but I'm just not going to support it. But that's not to take anything away from all the work that has gone into it, and that there seems to be an acceptance and comfort with it in that community. So, yeah.
Thank you. Right, a reply, Deputy Mayor Allen.
Yeah, look, just briefly, I fully respect the comments made by Councillor Jennings. Let's be clear, both Councillor Brannigan and I have acknowledged in the past, Foxton Beach is extraordinarily lucky to have that endowment fund. So therefore, to talk about how that fund should be dedicated towards core stuff, infrastructure and so on, is to miss the point. Councillor Jennings identifies that it is a shame or a sadness that we talk about the nice to haves at the beach rather than looking at core stuff, the infrastructure and so on. The fact is the people at the beach pay rates, and where there are infrastructural needs, those needs need to be met through the rating system in a fair, balanced way, as for anywhere in the district. The nice to haves are something the beach is very lucky to have, but that's what this fund is about. It's about taking the opportunity of an existing fund embraced in legislation and using it for those extras and for those things which can enrich the life of the beach in particular. So I just wanted to say that by way of balance.
Thank you. All right. Put the recommendation that Council adopts the revised Foxton Beach Endowment Fund policy incorporating community feedback. Those in favour? Against? 1, 2, 3. Councillor Boyle, were you for?
I was in favour.
You're right. It's just the timing. Sorry.
Could I ask for a formal division, please?
Sorry, Deputy Mayor's asked for a division, and Councillor Brannigan, the Deputy Mayor's asked for a division, so he just wants to ensure. 4. Alright, are you, sorry, Grayson, are you up with the play? Councillor Jennings?
Against.
Councillor Barker?
Against.
Councillor Proctor?
Against.
Councillor Horis Parr? 4. Councillor Young? 4. Councillor Tamihana? Aye. Councillor Grimstone? 4. Deputy Mayor Allen? 4. Councillor Boyle? Councillor Olsen?
4.
And I am 4. So the motion is carried. Thank you. Moving to 9.2, the proceedings of the Community Wellbeing Committee. Move that Council receive and note report 25/524, the proceedings of the Community Wellbeing Committee for the 13th of August 2025 and the associated minutes. Seconded by Councillor Grimstone. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items in those minutes that councillors wish to ask questions on or seek clarification on? We move to 9.3, the proceeding of the Community Funding and Recognition Committee for the 30th of July 2025, and move the recommendation that the report be received and the associated minutes. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. I just want to note in that committee the input that we received from the Youth Empowerment Committee, or the youth from, what do you call it, the network, Youth Network? Youth Voice, yes, and also the support that we received around on the revised Youth Excellence Awards criteria, but also in assisting us and giving us some guidance in terms of the grant applications that were made in that fund, which was extremely useful for a person of my age to understand what was going on. Yeah, that was very, very welcome. Councillor Grimstone.
Yeah, I did have a query, just I guess for some context within the minutes around. There was a discussion in general agreement about the need to appoint a committee member to act in situations where the chair and the mayor may disagree. It was agreed that committee members will be formally appointed in terms of reference at the start of each triennium. I'm interested to understand the context behind that minute.
Timing is probably the real reason as to why we want to do this, because the Community Funding and Recognition Committee only meets irregularly as required, and so to ensure that any applications that are made in particular to certain funds, especially the Youth Empowerment Fund, that we can actually make a decision rather than wait to a formal meeting. And so it was agreed that the chair and the mayor would be the two people that would decide that, and if there was a disagreement between the chair and the mayor, that a third person would be then would be formally appointed in the terms of reference at the start of each triennium to, I suppose, ensure that there was a majority of support for either or for or against that grant application. So it's just to try to smooth the process and make it easier, essentially. It's certainly not trying to take away the rights of the committee, and I would, it's for the new triennium to sort out when that comes up in terms of those terms of reference. Councillor Tamihana.
Thanks. Look, I just wanted to acknowledge the report too, and actually the youth that have applied to the fund and have been successful. I am interested to know though what it was for, because the report doesn't tell us, what they were for. But when I see names here like young Charles Kiriwana, I think it's really neat because he's actually displaying other leadership things out there in the community. Recently, I think he just organised the game between Poratawhao School and Kuputarua School, which is something that hadn't happened over multiple years. So it's good to see these young ones coming through that actually want to be engaged in these types of places.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, all the applications will be on and contained in the agenda for the meeting. Yeah, no, it's good to see the different types of applications being made within the grant. Yeah, in terms of the funding. All right, moving on to 9.4, the proceedings of the Risk and Assurance Committee for the 6th of August. Council receive and note that report and the associated minutes. Moved by Councillor Jennings, seconded by Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Anything you wish to highlight in particular, Councillor Jennings, in those minutes?
No, thank you. Thank you, Sir.
No worries. All right, that brings us to the end of our open agenda. Now going to move. Sorry? Where? Oh. Sorry. Proceedings of the Chief Executive Employment and Performance Committee for the 27th of August. Move receipt of the minutes of that meeting. Seconded by Councillor Hori Te Pā. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any questions or clarifications sought on that meeting? Being done, we'll move now to, that does bring us to the end of our open agenda, and so now move that we exclude the public while we consider the following items: C1, the Levin Wastewater Treatment Plant Upgrade Headwork; C2, gas procurement; C3, the proposed rating sale of 17 Churchill Crescent, Shannon; C4, Council Resolution and Actions Monitoring Report; C5, Proceedings of the Risk and Assurance Committee; and the C6, Proceedings of Te Awaho Foxton Community Board; and C7, Proceedings of the Chief Executive Employment and Performance Committee. Seconded by Councillor Hori Te Pā. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you all. Thank you to the members of the public that were